Chapter 711. Since the first time he traveled to Dayo, he had traveled back and forth at least 100 to 200 times. This was already instinctive to Rendezvous, and he didn't need to think too much about it. Often, the surrounding air would start to distort, and he would arrive in another world in an instant. Even after reaching the Earth wheel level, this feeling didn't change. Only someone with the strength of the Empress could detect a difference. However, this time was different from the past. Rendezvous felt as if he was immersed in water, and his surroundings felt squeezed. It was as if the air was repelling him. This process only lasted for less than an instant, but he could clearly feel that it was as if that instant had been stretched out. Subsequently, he felt himself being squeezed out by something that couldn't be seen or touched. He then realized that he was still in the Imperial carriage. It was just that the Empress was gone. Qing Yuan and Hong Wan were also gone. The bow hanging on the wall was also gone. The boxes in the carriage were also gone. Only he and the furry thing in his arms were left. The sky outside the carriage had turned from night to day. What happened? Rendezvous had yet to react when this question popped up in his mind. Subsequently, he felt the carriage tilt to one side, and he didn't know what was going on. Rendezvous' heart tightened. He didn't know what was going on, and he jumped out of the carriage in a flash. At the same time, a familiar shout came from below. "Don't hit me. It's Her Majesty's carriage." After jumping out of the carriage, Rendezvous took a good look at his surroundings. He was indeed on Earth, but he wasn't in a room, but on the roof. The group of people below hurriedly caught the Empress's carriage. If not for their sharp eyes, the carriage would have been turned into a pile of broken wood. The furry thing in Rendezvous' arms also moved. It sneezed a few times, then gave him a kick, turned into a beam of red light, and darted into the forest in the distance. Damn! Rendezvous was completely confused when he reacted. At that time, the Empress, Qing Yuan, and Hong Wan were all in the carriage, but he brought it back? Where was the Empress? Qing Yuan and Hong Wan? In addition, there was another serious problem. The Beachy actually followed him to Earth. Rendezvous rubbed his head and carefully looked at the forest behind him. The Beachy was nowhere to be found. Even if he could find it, he wouldn't be able to catch it. That thing was too fast. It was as fast as lightning. Not an adjective. Even the Empress might not necessarily be able to catch it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have suddenly rushed into his arms while he was shuttling back and forth. "Lady Boss, what happened?" More than 10 winged cavalry warriors asked as they looked at Rendezvous, who was standing on the roof in the cold wind. Rendezvous jumped down from the roof. He couldn't be bothered to answer this question and directly instructed, "Look after Her Majesty's Imperial carriage. If there's any damage, I'll plant you in the soil and see if I can grow 10 more by next year." After saying that, he returned to his room and sat there in a daze for a long time, trying to sort out the situation. He was too careless this time. In the past, he had always been in his room or in the wild, so he had neglected this matter. He was traveling with the things that he touched and that he could move. He had even brought back straw from the prison and soil from the wilderness. Although the Empress's Imperial carriage weighed more than 500 kilograms, it was now completely within the range that he could move, so he naturally brought it back. As for the Empress, Qing Yuan, and Hong Wan, as well as the things in the Imperial carriage, they were probably left in Dayo. The pressure that he felt when he shuttled back and forth was probably because the Imperial carriage had overlapped with the walls and roof of the room, which was why it was directly squeezed out. This gave Rendezvous an important piece of information. Even if something was placed in the place that he left, when he shuttled back and forth again, it wouldn't overlap with those things. Instead, it would directly repel him. This greatly reduced the risk. After sorting out the situation with the Imperial carriage, he began to worry again. The Beachy actually rushed into his arms and was brought to Earth when he shuttled back and forth. Furthermore, with its speed, he couldn't catch it at all. This was Shanghai, and many people usually came up to this mountain. If he was seen by others, he would just have to wait to see the news. For example, the shocking discovery of a flying fox somewhere. These were all trivial matters. Or someone encountered the arrival of the Grim Reaper and escaped unscathed, but the surrounding people suffered heavy casualties. This wasn't impossible. Rinpoche had a headache thinking about the trouble that this thing could cause. After thinking about it, Rinpoche felt that he had to think of a way to try. He opened the windows and let the cold wind blow in. At this time, it was early winter in Shanghai again. Rinpoche found a pile of various desserts, tore open the packaging one by one, and placed them on the bed. The pile was like a small mountain. After waiting for a long time, he didn't see the beachy appear. Even if it did, Rinpoche admitted that he couldn't do anything about it. After pondering for a long time, Rinpoche couldn't think of any good ideas. He simply turned on his computer and went online to search for ways to wait for it to come to him. Soon after, he found something good. Mouseboard. As long as he put the candy on the mouseboard, it would definitely fall for it as long as it came. It didn't matter how fast it was. As long as it stayed on it, it couldn't run away. Of course, an ordinary mouseboard definitely wouldn't work. Although its greatest advantage was its speed, it wouldn't be as weak as a mouse no matter how weak it was in other aspects. It had to be specially made. For example, a metal plate could be smeared with super strong glue. Rinpoche immediately called Shunfeng and asked her to find a way to get a mouseboard that met his requirements and send it over tomorrow. After that, Rinpoche ignored the pile of candy in the room, changed his clothes, and left. He felt that the little thing might be more easily fooled if he wasn't around. He would let it eat a little today to relax its vigilance and give it a surprise tomorrow. After taking the things that he cut off from the crocodile, Rinpoche called 2 winged cavalry warriors to accompany him to the Messiah 87 department. However, halfway through, Rinpoche suddenly felt his body become weightless. Then, he, in his car, fell. In the eyes of onlookers, a sinkhole suddenly appeared on the ground with Rinpoche at the center. Not only Rinpoche, but the 2 cars behind him also fell because they were too close. Rinpoche's car was at the bottom. Rinpoche finally experienced what it felt like to fall into a sinkhole at a speed of 60 kilometers per hour. In addition to the free fall, there was also the impact of crashing into the wall of the sinkhole. Then, another car directly smashed into his head. A series of events happened, and the sudden changes almost stunned Rinpoche. The airbag directly protruded from the front and firmly pinned Rinpoche to his seat. When Rinpoche tore open the airbag and climbed out of the car, he saw 6 or 7 men and women coming out of the 2 cars behind him. They gave him a strange feeling. In such a situation, an ordinary person would first look at the surrounding situation and think of a way to climb out, right? However, the other party was still dizzy when they climbed out of the car, but the moment they saw Rinpoche, they locked their eyes on him. One of them covered his collar and said, "We have fallen into a sinkhole with a target. Please give us instructions." The voice was very soft, but with Rinpoche's extraordinary hearing, he could hear it clearly. The other party was coming for him. After that, Rinpoche realized why he felt strange. It wasn't just the other party's reaction, but also their temperament. Although they looked similar, they weren't Chinese. "Do it." The first sentence was shouted by the other party. Chapter 712. Do it. Keep them alive. Following Rinpoche's words, a loud bang was heard. The deformed doors of the car that was squeezed at the very bottom flew out. 2 burly men in sportswear came out of the car with grins on their faces. The people opposite them looked cautious. One of them took out a palm-sized dagger from his waist and pointed it at the winged cavalry warriors. Looking at their reaction, Rinpoche felt like he was using an atomic bomb to kill mosquitoes. After so much effort, you guys only took out these little things? Are you kidding me? These things can't even kill a chicken, right? At least, they can't kill a chicken in Dayo. For people from the other side held daggers and surrounded the 2 winged cavalry warriors while the other 3 approached Rinpoche. Don't kill them. Rinpoche warned the winged cavalry warriors again. Looking at the small daggers in their hands, he began to feel that he was making a fuss over nothing. However, the other party was indeed coming for him. This was true. What he didn't understand was why the other party had taken out these small daggers. Did they really think that he was an ordinary person? If he was an ordinary person, the other party wouldn't need to use weapons, right? Rinpoche felt strange and a little funny. He didn't feel nervous at all as he watched the other party approach. Rinpoche could slap them to death with one slap. Even a 40-meter-long broadsword would be useless, let alone a dagger. Then, Rinpoche saw something shoot out from the side of the dagger that the other party was pointing at him. It was very small, very hidden, and most importantly, it was very close at only 2 to 3 meters away. Without thinking, Rinpoche moved forward instead of retreating and inserted himself into the gap between the three men. He then kicked one of them in the stomach and punched the other two in the chest. The distance was too close. Although he couldn't completely dodge them, he was able to prevent them from hitting his vital parts. The three of them didn't even have time to react before they spat out blood and slammed into the wall of the pit with horrified gazes, falling down limply. Rinpoche also felt a tingling sensation from his left shoulder and right rib. It's actually a gun that looks like a dagger. Rinpoche immediately denied this idea. No, it's not a gun. Rinpoche picked up a dagger from the ground and saw that there was something that looked like a trigger at the bottom of the dagger. It was just that he didn't notice it because the other party's finger had blocked it just now. On the side of the dagger's guard, there were 2 small holes. What's this? Rinpoche was a little puzzled as he held the dagger. What was this thing used for? He looked up at the other 2 sides and saw that the 2 winged cavalry warriors had also finished off their opponents. Although the opponents seemed to be holding a weapon, the lethality of the weapon was so low that it made one's hair stand on end, especially when it was in their hands. Rinpoche felt that they were playing house with him. At this moment, Rinpoche suddenly felt dizzy. Oh no, it's a knockout drug. No, it's a tranquilizer gun. Rinpoche immediately reacted. Fortunately, I brought 2 winged cavalry warriors with me. Just as this thought popped up in his mind, he heard someone beside him say, "Strange, why do I feel a little dizzy? What a coincidence. I'm a little dizzy too. The last time I felt this way was when someone hit me in the head with a stick. I haven't felt this way in a long time." The 2 of them chatted and exchanged their thoughts. Rinpoche was speechless. This bunch of idiots is unreliable. Rinpoche was almost angered to death by the 2 of them. He could only rely on himself now. Should I go up and wait for help or return to the car? Logically speaking, the people from the Messier 87 department should be behind him, right? However, it had been a few minutes since the accident, and the people from the Messier 87 department hadn't shown up yet. Since the other party dared to make a move, he was afraid that the people from the Messier 87 department were being held up. At the thought of this, Rinpoche immediately felt that it would be safer to return to the car. As long as the people from the Messier 87 department came, he would be safe. Although he felt dizzy, many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. However, when he returned to the side of the car, his body couldn't take it anymore. He only managed to stretch his upper body into the car before passing out. He didn't know that this tranquilizer gun could even put an elephant to sleep for 3 hours. No one had ever been able to last more than 5 seconds. They usually passed out after 1 to 3 seconds. However, he lasted for nearly a minute. After another 2 minutes, a car arrived at the scene. 3 people got out of the car and jumped into the pit. At this time, there were already 5 or 6 cars parked around and talking on the phone. However, these 3 people didn't pay any attention to the situation in the pit. They looked surprised, especially the 7 men who were spitting blood and lying limply on the ground. What about them? One of them asked hesitantly. When they rushed over, they didn't expect such a situation at all. This is an important matter. The target is more important, another person said. Take the target away. Let's go. The 3 of them pulled Rinpoche out of the car, dragged him to the road, and stuffed him into the car before driving off. Meanwhile, the 5 or 6 cars were still calling the police. Now, not only had an accident occurred, but it had also become a kidnapping case. In any case, the target is in our hands. As for them, let's wait for the higher-ups to think of a way to exchange them. After getting into the car, one of them sighed. The mission isn't over yet, so we can't let our guard down. We have to send him to the target location. They won't be able to hold on for long. Very soon, the people from China will catch up. We're ready. Turn right at the intersection, 600 meters ahead. There's a tow truck there. Put the car in and change to another one. There aren't any surveillance cameras there, so we should be able to delay them for some time. Hopefully, this will last longer. After saying that, the man angrily said, "Damn China, there are surveillance cameras everywhere." Then, he suddenly felt weightless. Before he could react, there was a strong impact. By the time the three of them climbed out of the car in a daze, they found themselves in a pit. Damn China's roads. Aren't they construction maniacs? Why is the quality of their roads so poor? This is their most prosperous city. Yet, there are pits everywhere. One of them cursed angrily. This mission was simply driving them crazy. Halfway through tracking, they fell into a pit and went from tracking to kidnapping. However, when they kidnapped the target, they thought that they had to worry about the other party's pursuers. In the end, the other party didn't come, and they fell into a pit again. Moreover, it was a pit that suddenly appeared. "Governor, you go and stop the car. Gatlin, you and I will drag them up." Another person frowned and tried to get out of the situation. The most important thing now was to deal with the pursuers. As for the damned quality of China's roads, it was none of their business. A moment later, the three of them dragged Renbachian into a polo that they had just stolen. "Thank you, China. There are people and cars everywhere," the strong man who was addressed as the governor said in relief. "If we were in other countries, we might not even see a passing car for half an hour. All right, although there was an accident, the intersection is just ahead. I can see it. Hopefully, everything will go smoothly." Before he finished speaking, they felt the familiar sense of weightlessness and the familiar impact. "I will never use things from China again." Gatlin roared angrily with his head bleeding. It was still the same familiar surroundings and the same big pit. "It's not far. Carry him," the leader ordered. The three of them carried Renbachian and ran wildly until they reached the intersection. "Be careful," Gatlin suddenly roared and leaped to the side while dragging Renbachian. The heart-wrenching sound of tires rubbing against the ground, the wind blowing past their faces, and the sudden splash of flesh and blood could be heard. Chapter 713. Governor. Gatlin's eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with pain. He had been on so many missions and survived no matter how dangerous the situation was. He didn't expect to die like this in China, being hit by a car that went out of control. After the car killed the governor, it smashed through the wall next to it and crashed into another building before stopping. This also confirmed that it was indeed a car that went out of control. The ear-piercing screeching sound at the beginning and the route that the car took proved this point. The other man's eyes flashed with sorrow. "Let's go, Governor." Gatling looked ferocious. "We can't care anymore," the other man growled at him. "Don't forget what we are here for. Now that the target is in our hands, we must send him away to complete our mission." Gatling gritted his teeth and quickly calmed down. The two men carried Renbachian and continued to rush to the predetermined location. They braced themselves and kept an eye on their surroundings, fearing that something would go wrong again. Too many things had happened during this short journey today. It made them wonder if they had been abandoned by God. They hoped that God would bless them and that nothing would go wrong for the rest of the journey. However, Gatling suddenly fell to the ground when he was 50 meters away from the destination. Renbachian's head fell to the ground along with him. "Gatling." The other man was shocked. "I sprained my ankle." Gatling got up from the ground with a bitter look on his face. He tried to land on his feet, but the pain made him break out in a cold sweat. However, he still stood there steadily. "Can you make it on one leg?" the other man said as he carried Renbachian on his back. Although he had suffered some injuries when he crashed into the pit, his clothes were soaked with sweat after carrying Renbachian, who weighed more than 100 kilograms, for such a long distance. However, he had no choice now. Even if it meant death, he had to send the target to the predetermined location. Fortunately, there were no problems during the last few dozen meters. A box truck was parked there, and there was no one in it. The trunk was originally meant for the previous car, but it was no longer necessary. In front of the truck was a very ordinary Volkswagen Jetta. The two of them stuffed Renbachian into the trunk and drove toward the beach. The two of them were on tenterhooks as they drove, afraid that they would fall into a pit again. Fortunately, the journey was smooth, and they quickly boarded the speedboat. There were 2 more people waiting, and when they saw the 2 of them coming with their target, they quickly set sail. In 20 minutes, they would be able to leave the territorial waters and enter the international waters in 3 hours. They had only sailed for a dozen nautical miles when 2 corvettes followed them from afar and kept trying to radio them to stop and inspect the ship. However, the speed of the guard boat was much slower than their speedboat, so it didn't take long for them to shake it off. Seeing that the corvette behind them had shrunk to a small depth, the few of them felt relieved. When they turned their heads and saw that Renbachien was still unconscious, they felt relieved. Keep an eye on him. I'm afraid this guy is an expert in unarmed combat. The 7 people at the scene were all seriously injured, and 3 of them were probably injured by him. Moreover, they were under the effect of anesthesia. He probably knocked them down in an instant. If he wakes up, the speedboat is so narrow, and the few of us may not be his match, the man who brought Renbachien all the way said. Being tied up so tightly, what can he do even if he wakes up? It's almost time to give him a first aid injection. If an accident happens, we won't be able to account for it. After all, we paid a huge price to catch him. Another person took out a miniature syringe from a box on the boat and prepared to give Renbachien an injection. This kind of anesthesia was very powerful, but it was also very harmful. Without a first aid injection, the person who was shot could easily die from paralysis. Can you speak Mandarin? Also, what's in your hand? At this moment, Renbachien, who was still thought to be unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes and spoke, giving them a shock. How is this possible? With this dosage, even an elephant would need to sleep for an hour, and a normal person would need to sleep for at least 6 hours. The few of them were shocked. Calculating the time, it had only been 1.5 hours, and he had actually woken up. Renbachien was tightly tied up. When he opened his eyes, he first looked around. It was very bumpy, and he was on the sea. He already knew this before he opened his eyes. There were 4 people near him, a brown-haired white man with a cigarette in his mouth, a blonde white man, a brown-skinned man who looked like a South American, and an East Asian man. A few of them seemed to be shocked. As for his own environment, he was very clear about it. He was tied up tightly and was even mounted on a speedboat. If he was normal, he reckoned that he would be in a prison cell or a laboratory in a few hours. Unfortunately, he wasn't normal to ordinary people. He had too many ways to escape. At worst, he could directly return to Dayo and bring the Empress back. No matter where he was or how many people there were around him, as long as the Empress was around, these people were like raw pork on a chopping board. In this kind of situation, he naturally couldn't feel nervous. Who are you people? Where are you taking me? What do you want to do? Renbachien asked unhurriedly. Hello, Mr. Run. You will understand who we are in the future. As for where we are taking you and what we want to do, you will also understand when you reach the place. For your safety, I hope you will be quiet and not move, the blonde white man said in fluent Mandarin. Although the target had already woken up, this surprised him. However, in this kind of situation, it didn't matter even if the target woke up. He was like a fish on a chopping board and couldn't do anything. Surprisingly, Renbachien and the other party had the same thoughts when they looked at each other. Renbachien pondered for a while and now had 2 choices. The first was to kill the other party and then drive the speedboat back. However, it was troublesome to be constantly being targeted. As for the second choice, it was to follow the other party to their nest and then wipe them out in one go. After 30 seconds of careful consideration, Renbachien made up his mind. Of course, he would choose the first option. The other party was most likely an agent of that Western country. So what if he went to their nest? Could he still kill their president? He reckoned that they would directly lock him up in the laboratory. There were many tricks on Earth that were indeed impossible to guard against. Just like this time, the other party used a dagger with anesthetic bullets, and he was actually defeated by 3 people due to his carelessness. Even if he fought them barehanded, he could still defeat 100 of them. The most important thing was that he was waiting to get married. How could he have the time to talk nonsense with them? Therefore, Renbachien immediately made the most cowardly choice. As for the other party's thoughts, let them be. In any case, the other party would at most give him some trouble. As long as they still wanted the things in his head, they wouldn't kill him. After making up his mind, the rest was easy. Gentlemen, this is China. I hope you can state your intentions. Otherwise, you will be arrested for espionage and kidnapping, Ren Baqian said unhurriedly. Aha, kid, if you can do it. Another East Asian grinned and laughed. He then got up and moved to Ren Baqian's side. He looked at him with a teasing expression and said, Perhaps you should understand your current situation. Chapter 714. If Ren Baqian hadn't fainted, he would have known this East Asian man's nickname, Gatling. Of course, this did not mean that the other party was like a storm in other aspects, but that his mouth was like Gatling's. Only a few people could calm him down. However, to Ren Baqian, it didn't matter what his name was. He wasn't interested in remembering the names of dead people. Ren Baqian tilted his head and took the initiative to meet Gatling's fist. Crack! The sound of bones breaking could be heard. Gatling let out a blood-curdling scream. They shivered and even took out their guns. Ren Baqian looked innocent and said, He did it. Damn it, this guy's head is like a rock. Gatling cursed and raised his leg to kick him. Crack! This time, Gatling was holding his hands and feet and screaming. Ren Baqian sneered in his heart. He couldn't beat the Empress, but even if he was tied up like this, he still had 100 ways to make an ordinary person unable to take care of himself for the rest of his life. Only after breaking through to the Earthwheel level would he know how big the gap between an ordinary person and an Earthwheel expert was. Damn it, behave yourself. The South American pointed his gun at Ren Baqian. Or, do you want to die? Even a fool would know that Ren Baqian was up to no good. Ren Baqian continued to look innocent. Was it wrong for me to be beaten? I can only say that he is too weak. His soft fists are like tofu. Not only him, but all of you are the same. Why did you choose such a person? Do you want me to introduce 2 experts to you? Shut up. Did I tell you to behave yourself? That man looked ferocious. Even though Ren Baqian was tied up tightly, he was still able to shrug his shoulders and keep his mouth shut. You're really stupid. That man scolded Gatling again before returning to his seat. Gatling looked at Ren Baqian with a vicious look in his eyes. His lips kept opening and closing as he cursed silently. If the higher-ups didn't want him alive, he would have killed this bastard right now. Don't be provoked by him. He is our mission target. As long as we send him to the destination, our mission will be completed, the blond man said. As soon as he said that, a dolphin suddenly jumped up from the bow and collided with the speedboat. The dolphin was sent flying before it could even let out a cry. In fact, because many fishermen would feed the dolphins, they would often chase after the fishing boats to play, and getting hit by them would also happen. However, it was still frightening for it to suddenly jump out and collide with the speedboat. The ship also shook violently, swaying from side to side and almost overturning. Gatlin, who was sitting on the side with one hand and one foot, screamed and was directly thrown out. Damn dolphins! The brown-haired man cursed as he turned the speedboat around and returned to the struggling Gatlin. Catch! The South American man tied a life buoy with a rope and threw it to the side of the Gatling. Ren Baqian saw that the South American man had his back facing him. The brown-haired man was steering the speedboat, and only the golden-haired man was looking at him. He immediately knew that his opportunity had come. Out of the 4 people just now, at least 3 of them were able to pull out their guns immediately. If he killed one with his golden spear, the others would turn him into a sieve. Golden spear. Ren Baqian looked at the golden-haired man and called out in his mind. Then, a spearhead emerged from Ren Baqian's head. Ren Baqian looked like a calabash. The golden-haired man was stunned when he saw this scene and asked incredulously, What's this? Kill him. Ren Baqian ordered in his mind while calling out, Metal chain, tie up the other person. The golden spear was speechless. It retracted without saying a word. The spear head retracted, and another metal chain emerged from Ren Baqian's head. The first 3 sections were bent like a snake's head, and it looked around before retracting as well. Damn! Ren Baqian almost vomited blood. These 2 cowards. It was rare for them to be useful, but they were actually terrified? Huh. Terrified at this time? The two of you are simply deceiving me. I have worked so hard to raise you for so many years, but now that I need you, you are actually terrified? The golden-haired man rubbed his eyes in disbelief as he saw a spearhead and a metal chain emerge from Renbachian's head. He stammered, "The Jingu Bang." In his memory, the only thing he could think of was the Jingu Bang, although it didn't look like it. What happened? The other two were alarmed by his voice and turned to look. A rod and a metal chain emerged from his head. The golden-haired man said in disbelief. Then, the two of them looked at Renbachian suspiciously and then at the golden-haired man as if they were looking at a fool. A rod and a metal chain emerged from his head? However, to be on the safe side, the South American man still came over to check on Renbachian. There were no abnormalities. As for the rod and the metal chain, they probably only existed in the golden-haired man's imagination. "Dentist, apply to see a psychiatrist when you go back," the brown-haired man said. "I really saw it," the golden-haired man said anxiously. "You are probably under too much psychological pressure. Recently, there have been too many missions, and you should take a break. We carried him onto the boat, and he didn't have anything on him." Capoeira also just checked him again, the brown-haired man said. "Well, maybe you are right," the golden-haired man said in distress. Even he felt that it was impossible. Maybe it was really an illusion. Gatling was dragged back onto the speedboat, lying on the ground and spitting out a few mouthfuls of water. The torment just now had exhausted him, especially since he was now disabled. "It's time to leave. Those guard boats may still be behind us, and we will be caught up if we delay any longer," the brown-haired man said as he started the speedboat. At the same time, he turned his head to look at the sea and frowned. "The blood of that dolphin seems to have attracted sharks. Sit tight." Then, the speedboat quickly moved forward. To be honest, everyone was a little worried just now. Although they weren't in China's territorial waters, they were in China's economic waters, and the other party could catch up at any time. Now that the speedboat had set sail again, everyone was finally relieved. However, before they could sail for more than 3 nautical miles, they felt the hull shake again, and the entire boat flew out of the water. Everyone quickly held on to the places around them that they could hold on to, and Renbachian happened to be stuck in his seat. Just now, the bottom of the boat had directly hit the upper part of a whale shark, directly breaking it open, and the speedboat was directly sent flying. "Ah!" Gatling's trembling voice came from the air, and they saw him being thrown out again. The few people on the boat had just calmed down from the shock, and their faces darkened when they found out that he had been thrown out again. Why was it another collision? How could they collide twice in such a huge sea? And why was it you again? How could you fall down twice in such a short time? The brown-haired man had no choice but to turn the speedboat around to pick up Gatling again. The golden-haired man, who was called Dentist, suddenly said to Renbachian, "You are loved by God." What? Renbachian didn't hear clearly what the other party said. Dentist, on the other hand, had a bitter look on his face as he drew a cross on himself. After catching the target today, he finally understood one thing when he linked the series of events together. There were really people in this world who were loved by God. For example, this person in front of him. Since the beginning of the operation, not a single place had been smooth. They had been affected by all kinds of accidents from the beginning to the end. Chapter 7:15. If there were any enemies in the world that were the most difficult to deal with, it would be those whose God was always on their side. You could defeat a strong person or a smart person, but you couldn't defeat a person who was wrapped in luck, because they would always turn danger into safety, and everything you did would become a wedding dress in the end, just like the protagonists in those novels. That was what Dentist was feeling now. Ever since he caught the target, luck seemed to have turned away from them, and bad luck came one after another. This made him a little afraid. He had undergone a long period of rigorous training, but it didn't allow him to defeat people who were shrouded in the gaze of God. "What nonsense are you talking about?" The brown-haired man scolded in a low voice as he drove the speedboat around the sea to pick up Gatling. "You didn't see what I experienced. You don't know how it felt when a sinkhole suddenly appeared on the road several times in a row. You also don't know how I felt when I saw the governor being hit by an out-of-control car. Look, Gatling has fallen into the sea twice now. Why? So many coincidences? Dentist's face twitched as he shouted. Yes, they're coincidences. We will complete the mission soon, the brown-haired man said matter-of-factly. Huh. Do you believe that such coincidences will happen again? Dentist roared angrily. We'll talk about it when the time comes, the brown-haired man said indifferently. Then he looked at the sea, and his expression changed dramatically. Oh no, the South American man called Capoeira and noticed it earlier than him, and his expression was even worse. They saw Gatling's face full of terror, shouting something and struggling nonstop. The seawater around him seemed to be boiling as if it was stirred by something. The culprit of all this was the dorsal fin that occasionally appeared on the surface of the sea. It was a shark. Hurry up! Hurry up! Capoeira kept urging. The speed of the speedboat was very fast, 60 knots per hour. However, it was precisely because of its fast speed that had thrown Gatling too far away. It would take at least 3 minutes to go around in a big circle to get back. These 3 minutes had decided Gatling's life and death. When they rushed back, several sharks were taking turns to attack Gatling. Like a cavalry charge, they repeatedly charged at him. Blood dyed the seawater red. Gatlings and the whale sharks. Catch it, come up. Capoeira threw the swimming ring over. The swimming ring landed in front of Gatling, but Gatling stretched out his hand, but he had no strength at all. In the end, he could only shake it helplessly and was dragged into the water by a shark. D*M in it. D*M in it. D*MNB** starred. Capoeira kept shooting at the sea with his gun, his eyes bloodshot. Although Gatling wasn't likable, he shouldn't die here at this time. Complete the mission. Do you really think we can complete the mission safely? The governor and Gatling are finished. Dentist seemed to be laughing and crying at the same time. What nonsense are you talking about? If you keep babbling, I'll kill you first. Now, shut up and sit down. When you get back, you can apply for your resignation. The brown-haired man cursed loudly. Rinpoche looked at the dentist in amusement. This guy was actually frightened by his own imagination. Unfortunately, he was not loved by God. It was more accurate to say that he was the god of misfortune. As for these fellows, they could be considered as fish in the moat. However, he was exceptionally happy to see the miserable state of these people. His only hope was that nothing would happen to this boat. He had just returned and would have to stay for at least a day and a half before he could go back. If anything happened to this boat, he would be in trouble along with it. The problem now was how to untie this rope. Damn it, these people were quite professional in tying him up. His hands were tied behind his back, and his thumbs were locked together. He couldn't exert any strength at all. His arms and legs were also tightly tied up with nylon ropes that were as thick as a thumb. Golden Spear cut the rope behind me, Rinpoche said in his mind. Although these two scammers had angered him to death, he could only rely on them now. Then he felt his two thumbs loosen. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief and thought to himself, fortunately, I'm not fooled this time. Also, the rope on my arms and legs. Rinpoche almost didn't feel any sharp blade cutting the rope, and the rope was directly loosened. The change in the rope was immediately noticed by Capoeira, who took out his gun and aimed at Rinpoche. Rinpoche put his palm on the ground, bounced up, and stepped on Capoeira's head. Puffed. The entire boat sank, and the South American man's neck was stepped into his chest. He died instantly. This change was so sudden that the other two people couldn't react at all. They saw Capoeira suddenly become shorter, and there was an extra person on top of his head. The brown-haired man was about to pick up the gun beside him when Rinpoche appeared beside him as if he had teleported and stepped on his palm. The brown-haired man let out a miserable howl. His entire palm was crushed by this stomp. Rinpoche opened his fingers and lifted him up by his head. With a friendly smile, he said, "As long as I use a little more force, your head will crack like an egg." Bang! So, you better be quiet just like him. Isn't that good? Ever since Rinpoche had launched an attack, Dentist had reached out for his gun, but quickly retracted his hand. The other party was too fast. It was hard to believe that humans could be so fast. He didn't even see the other party's shadow before he suddenly appeared on top of Capoeira's head. He even suspected that the other party knew some kind of magic. Dentist was very sure that he couldn't draw his gun as fast as the other party. Furthermore, the other party was someone who was loved by God. Gatling's fate was already clear. He had already boarded the boat, but he died in such a ridiculous manner. This made him feel fear from the bottom of his heart. Rin Bachien saw the fear in the brown-haired man's eyes, gently placed him back in his seat, and even stroked his head as if he was comforting a pet. Now that we're going to Rendezvous Point, where are you taking me? Rin Bachien suddenly changed his mind because he remembered something. This incident had exposed a major weakness of him and the winged cavalry. It was this kind of concealed weapon that made it easy for him to fall into their trap when he was careless. If he went back now and said that he had these people under control after waking up, however, this would also confirm this weakness that could be easily targeted and looked down upon. It would be better to put on a show and make people think that he was deliberately captured in order to catch the people behind the scenes and give them a deep revenge. This would also be in line with the image that he had been trying to create. The brown-haired man immediately fell into a dilemma. If he refused, he would definitely die and fail the mission. If he agreed, he would become a traitor to the country. However, there were so many people there, and they might be able to capture him again. If that was the case, he would be able to atone for his crimes. In China's words, this was called beating someone at their own game. I got it, the brown-haired man said as he folded his right hand. There's a submarine waiting in front, and it will send you to the base. Well, I like obedient children. Rin Bachien smiled, threw all the weapons on the boat into the sea, and then sat in his seat to enjoy the sea breeze. Base. That base in Japan, right? On the other side, the Messier 87 was in chaos. Rin Bachien had been captured. Even Yang's son couldn't believe it. They were obviously so powerful, but they were actually knocked out by a few tranquilizer bombs. This was simply shocking. We must rescue him. At any cost. Yang's son gritted his teeth. No matter what, he couldn't let Rin Bachien fall into the enemy's hands. He first called the higher-ups, and the instructions he received were the same as his own. Then, he quickly arranged his men. The most important thing was where Rin Bachien would be sent to. Contact Shun Feng and inform the cavemen in the villa. Although these people are like a group of primitive lunatics, they can still use force at times like this. The people from the Blessed Enclave were referred to as cavemen for short. In private, many people directly call them cavemen. After a while, the villa was in an uproar. The lady boss had actually been captured. If Her Majesty knew about this, there would definitely be a big problem. They didn't forget that Her Majesty had brought the lady boss all the way to Great Xia. They had to snatch the lady boss back. Who did it? Kill them. Kill them. Where's my knife? Take out all your knives. Chapter 716. Where's the lady boss? A group of people donned their leather armor and wielded their sabers. Their murderous intent soared to the sky. If something happened to the lady boss, even if the Empress didn't skin them alive, they wouldn't have the face to stay any longer. Let's wait. That girl just called to say that she's investigating the whereabouts of the lady boss and will let us know when she finds out. Sue sat on the sofa, propped his saber on the ground, and stroked the scabbard with one hand. Speaking of which, I haven't seen blood in a long time. My saber has been thirsty for blood for a long time. We're the best at killing generals, capturing flags, and killing entire families. Those people are too weak to save a lady boss, Xiong said. He had followed them to the Southern Dynasty to look for the two missing people and had underestimated the combat power of the Messier 87 department. Logically speaking, the lady boss's strength should be sufficient now. Although they haven't fought before, there shouldn't be anyone in this country who can beat him, right? I watched those combat competitions on TV, and all of them were as soft as the women of Great Xia. How could the lady boss be captured? Even if they had guns, they wouldn't be able to do anything to her. Shirtong and Jiang Yuanshan accompanied the lady boss out. Where are they? They seem to be fine. They are now at the Messier 87 department. We will only know the details after seeing them, Su Wei said. The group of people chatted for a while and then stopped talking, waiting for news. They closed their eyes and rested, preparing for the upcoming battle. The winged cavalry had seen many life and death battles and were used to conserving their energy before battle. Shenfeng didn't notice anything wrong when she walked out of the door. As she pushed open the door and walked in, 10 men who were sitting lazily with their eyes closed suddenly opened their eyes. The room seemed to be illuminated, and everyone's eyes revealed a cold glint. They gave her the feeling of 10 ferocious beasts ready to hunt, and they were even more terrifying than ferocious beasts. They had completely lost their original carefree look. Shun Feng subconsciously arched her body and leaped backward. She then realized that this was a conditioned reflex, and these people wouldn't attack her. "Where's the lady boss?" Su Wei asked Shun Feng, who had retreated and returned. "A department called the Messier 87 informed me, but I'm not sure about the details. But before I came here, I called them again. They're still looking for the whereabouts of the lady boss. If there is any news, they will inform me immediately, so I also came here to wait." Hearing this, everyone closed their eyes again. "What are you guys wearing leather armor for? Performing in an opera? Wearing this on the street? It's almost as if you're going to cause trouble," Shun Feng said as she looked at them. Everyone pondered for a while and realized that they weren't in Dayo or going to war. Although he had only killed people in his life and had never saved anyone, his cerebellum thought that it was not suitable to wear these things on the streets. Everyone obediently went back and changed into their sportswear. However, they still held their long sabers in their hands. Everyone silently stroked the scabbard or rested. Shenfeng could no longer stay in this atmosphere for 5 minutes. It was too depressing. It wasn't the kind of oppressive feeling when no one spoke. Instead, it was as if the air had been sealed, making it difficult for people to even breathe. It was like being surrounded by a pack of wolves. After waiting for 3 hours, they finally got the news they wanted. The satellite found the speedboat. They also saw Ren Bachien being brought onto a submarine. To be able to send such an agent and have a submarine in this location, even if they couldn't detect the submarine's movements, they could still guess where they were going. This was because that was the only place where submarines could dock. It was also the country's largest naval base in the western Pacific Ocean. After getting the exact news, Yang Sun hesitated for a moment because there were tens of thousands of Navy soldiers there. However, Ren Bachian's matter was too important to fail. He wouldn't hesitate even if he had to make a scene. For this reason, he also pulled over a dozen experts trained by the military from that base. They were all man-will experts. Although they weren't as terrifying as the cavemen, they were more suitable for infiltration and combat with firearms. At this time, Ren Bachian was on his first submarine trip in his life. Although he was locked in the cabin with the brown-haired man and the dentist, he was still in the dark. Ren Bachian was prepared to make a scene at the other party's base before slipping back to Dayo. With his current strength, as long as he wasn't surrounded by people in an open space, he would still be safe. At most, he would find a place to hide for a day or two and then directly return to Dayo. In any case, he would cause trouble for the other party. In this way, the matter of him being knocked over by a tranquilizer gun could be said to be intentional. In any case, he would be able to regain some face. Wasn't it because of the Empress's strength that the nation had always treated him and the Empress with respect? In the end, he was knocked over by a tranquilizer gun. He was afraid that he would be looked down upon. Ren Bachian had always believed in one thing, and that was to keep his fangs outside. This would save him a lot of trouble. If he was looked down upon, there would be a lot of trouble in the future. In the face of a nation's size, it was very likely that he would really become a pig. Both Ren Bachian and the brown-haired man had their own plans. If they couldn't even take down one target with so many people in the base, it would simply be a joke. Both parties had their own plans, but they had forgotten that things didn't always go their way, especially when Ren Bachian was currently favored by a certain *T stir. After traveling for less than 2 hours, the submarine began to stop. The dentist went out of the cabin to inquire and found out that the propeller was actually entangled in a fishing net. They had to surface to clear the fishing net from the propeller. Upon hearing this news, the dentist went into the cabin and looked at Rinpoche with a complicated gaze. He then lowered his head and remained silent. Sure enough, it was another accident. What would be the next accident? When would it happen? The dentist silently drew a cross on his forehead and chest. The second accident came very quickly. When the submarine urgently floated to the surface, everyone suddenly felt the submarine violently shake as if it had collided with something. Rinpoche's heart suddenly skipped a beat. If there was a problem with the submarine, he could only kill everyone in the submarine and fight for enough oxygen to last for a day and a half. However, he didn't know that the electrolytic oxygen production equipment and the oxygen in the liquid oxygen tank were enough for everyone on the submarine to survive for 3 months. If that really happened, it could only be said that these people were unlucky. Fortunately, that didn't happen, and the submarine safely returned to the surface. The dentist went out to inquire and brought back a few pieces of information. First, the submarine sonar system had also malfunctioned. After that, when it surfaced, it didn't discover a fishing boat from Japan. Originally, it was thought that the thing entangled in the propeller was an abandoned fishing net floating in the sea. This kind of situation would occasionally happen. Now, it seemed like this wasn't the case at all. Second, the fishing boat had capsized, and dozens of people had fallen into the sea. Currently, the soldiers on the submarine were inspecting the submarine and participating in the rescue. Third, this submarine probably couldn't dive anymore. They were contacting other ships to pick up these people. The dentist kept looking at Rinpoche as he reported these few pieces of information. Sure enough, there was another accident. If he could, he really wanted to give up this mission and escape immediately. The further he got from that person, the better. Even the brown-haired man had an incredulous look in his eyes. There were actually consecutive accidents. There was an accident with the car, an accident with the speedboat, and now there was an accident with the submarine. Was this person really loved by God? Chapter 717. Sitting in the submarine, Rinpoche felt helpless. Why was it so difficult for him to do something? It wasn't easy for him to make up his mind to wreak havoc at the enemy's base, but something happened to the submarine. He should really dissect the beachy to see what it was made of. If he could figure it out, he would probably be able to develop a weapon based on the law of causality. This level of misfortune was comparable to that of the god of misfortune. He felt that it was stronger than the last time he saw it. Although there were earthquakes, collapsing houses, being attacked by eagles, and being assassinated, it wasn't as frequent as this time. Driving a car into a pit, a speedboat collided with a shark, and now a submarine collided with a fishing boat. This journey could no longer be described as full of disasters. Rinpoche felt that if he were to obediently stay at their base for a month, wouldn't their base become a wasteland? Rinpoche's current mood was as if he had prepared for a long time and was full of anticipation while taking advantage of a few days of vacation to travel, only to have a problem with his transportation. He was full of resentment. After waiting in the cabin for 2 hours, the sky began to darken, and the waves began to get bigger. Wave after wave hit the submarine, causing it to shake violently. Following that, bean-sized raindrops came crashing down. Rinpoche listened to the sound of the raindrops hitting the steel and thought that it was fortunate that this was a submarine. If it were any other boat, he would really be worried that it would be capsized by the waves. There was no worst-case scenario in today's situation, only worse. The brown-haired man and dentist were also deeply worried. At this time, there were noises coming from outside. After the captain contacted the base, he finally allowed the fishermen to enter the submarine, but they were limited to a small area. The fishing boat had already sunk to the bottom of the sea. Following that, the submarine began to dive to avoid the storm and big waves on the sea. The storm on the sea came and went quickly. 2 hours later, the sky cleared up after the rain, and a 30-meter-long transport helicopter appeared in the sky. When Rinpoche and the other 2 people moved into the helicopter, there was already a team of armed soldiers inside. 9 people made up a combat team. Although there were 9 people in the cabin, more than half of the space was empty. Seeing the soldiers in the cabin, the brown-haired man hesitated. After weighing the risk of fighting with Rinpochian in the plane, he gave up the idea. After greeting the other party and exchanging a few words, the two of them sandwiched Rinpochian in the middle of the cabin and sat him down like real criminals. Hey, you didn't say anything strange because I can't understand it, right? Rinpochian smiled from ear to ear. There's no need, the brown-haired man said. I don't plan on dying with you here. I'm not ready to die for my country. Very good. Rinpochian smiled. The soldiers around them looked at them in confusion, not knowing what they were talking about. However, their mission was to send these 3 people to the base, and they couldn't be bothered with anything else. After a while, Rinpochian started to feel strange because the helicopter wasn't flying east but south. If they flew east, they would reach the largest naval base in East Asia. His original destination was also there. Flying south could only mean Zhuo base. It was the largest base for helicopters and amphibious ships. Not far from it was the Tsong base, which had the most land forces stationed there. Along the way, Rinpochian experienced a close air refueling and took another 2 hours to land slowly. Unfortunately, he could only see the sea from where he was and couldn't see the full view of the base. Rinpochian clenched his fists and felt a little nervous. After all, it was unthinkable for an average person to create havoc in a military base with tens of thousands of soldiers. In the eyes of people like Rinpochian, who grew up on Earth, the strong military power of the military base was deeply rooted. Rinpochian felt that he was too arrogant to have such a crazy plan. However, he also wanted to see how far he could go. In any case, he could just raise his hands and surrender if he couldn't win. After the helicopter vibrated for a while, it steadily landed on the ground. The soldiers stood up and said to the 3 of them, "You can go down now." The brown-haired man and the dentist once again sandwiched Rinpochian as he got off the helicopter. Before Rinpochian even got off, he saw a team of soldiers with loaded guns waiting below. Including the team behind, there were 4 combat teams with more than 30 people. For an ordinary person, even if this number was divided by 10, it would be enough. Most importantly, this was an empty field surrounded by lawns and barbed wire. Not far away was the dock, where a warship and some amphibious ships were parked. Soldiers could be seen everywhere, and there were soldiers standing guard everywhere. There were also forklifts coming and going, and a large number of wooden boxes piled up on the side. In fact, during this period of time, a fleet was conducting an exercise here, and this base was providing logistics for this exercise. The timing of this operation and this exercise couldn't be said to be unrelated. It was just that Rinpochian's whereabouts were erratic. If he had been a few days late, the fleet would have returned, and the deterrent force of this fleet would have been reduced. However, Rinpochian just happened to appear at this time, which made the other party overjoyed. "I'm Major Wallace. Your plane can't depart for another 6 hours. Before that, follow me." A white man came over and saluted. Seeing this, the brown-haired man didn't hesitate anymore. He suddenly broke into a run and shouted, "Be careful! Catch him!" Many of the soldiers were stunned. Wasn't he already here? However, they only froze for a moment before they reacted and took out their weapons one after another. Rinpochian had arrived at his destination. Ignoring the brown-haired man, he leaped up and pounced on Major Wallace in front of him. He was like a ferocious tiger coming down the mountain. The Major immediately felt as if a huge tiger was pouncing on him with a fishy wind. When a tiger hunted, it could pounce 7 to 8 meters away. If it ran or pounced from above, the distance could be even further. Coupled with the tiger's weight and strength of more than 1,000 kilograms, humans had almost no ability to resist. Although Rinpochian's physique couldn't compare to that of tiger, his pounce was more swift and fierce. He covered a distance of more than 10 meters in an instant. This was a move of the military fist of death, which was specially used to pounce into the enemy's formation. With one strike, the target would be split in half, and the next move would be a sweep with the saber. With a single sweep, he could clear out an empty space. Only the Aboriginals would use such a bold and ferocious move. Although Rinpochian didn't have a saber in his hand, that pounce carried the force of 1,000 kilograms. Puffed. Like a smashed watermelon, red and white matter flew in all directions. Rinpochian then grabbed the corpse that hadn't fallen and swept it horizontally, sending 5 or 6 soldiers who were taking out their weapons flying. He then threw the corpse of the soldiers behind him and rushed into the crowd in front of him without looking back. One had to know that these soldiers were from the Special Forces and were ranked highly in the world. However, in the face of Rinpochian's sudden burst of strength, they had almost no power to resist. In the blink of an eye, 5 or 6 of them were sent flying by his kicks or collisions. Their internal organs and blood sprayed out in the air, and it was obvious that they wouldn't survive after falling to the ground. The brown-haired man and the group of soldiers who escorted him were dumbfounded. 5 seconds. In just 5 seconds, Rinpochian had already pounced on the crowd and started a massacre. More than 10 people had lost their fighting strength. Half of the soldiers behind him were sent flying by the corpse. The rest had just unlocked the safety and placed their guns on their shoulders to take aim. However, they couldn't capture Rinpochian's movements at all, especially now that he was massacring the group of soldiers. With his speed, it would be difficult for those people to even think of escaping. This scene sent a chill down everyone's spine. Were they really facing a human? Chapter 718. Rinpochian charged into the crowd and started a massacre. In the blink of an eye, half of the people around him had been cleared. Rinpochian didn't delay any further. After all, this place was too spacious. If they reacted, it would be difficult for him to dodge with so many soldiers and guns. In the past, he used to use anti-aircraft machine guns to deal with the experts from Great Xia. Now, it was the other way around. Their positions had swapped, and the other party was pointing their guns at him. After clearing half of the people, Rinpochian dashed toward a building in the distance at high speed. Immediately, gunshots rang out behind him. Rinpochian felt a chill on his back even before the gunshots rang out. He knew that he was being aimed at. He kept changing his position, using the wooden planks and boxes to block the enemy's shooting trajectory, or simply moving in a snake-like manner. Rinpochian's movements were too fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already dashed 200 to 300 meters away. Those soldiers only fired a few shots before losing sight of him. There were many people in the direction that Rinpochian was running toward. If they were to fire again, the probability of hitting their own people would be much higher than hitting Rinpochian. Following the gunshots, the soldiers who were going to and fro in the base were stunned. They had no idea what was going on. Even if they were beaten to death, they wouldn't believe that someone would kill someone in the military base. Furthermore, it was only one person. They could only hear the gunshots, but they didn't know what exactly happened. Many of them stopped what they were doing and stood there waiting for news. Some of the people who were closer looked in the direction of the gunshots. Only a few of them saw what happened in just a few seconds and were dumbstruck. They truly understood what it meant to rise and fall like a falcon. After Rinpochian ran for 400 meters, he relaxed. The rifle's range was about this distance. From here to the interior of the base was about 2 kilometers. With his speed, it would take him less than 2 minutes to cover the distance. They definitely wouldn't be able to react in time. Once he entered the interior of the base, he wouldn't have anything to worry about in such a complicated situation. The first time he killed someone was during the Great Hunt against the consecrated expert from the Lien family. He had just advanced to the Earthwheel level, but he was able to block his bullets with a saber. When facing Great Xia, the Great Xia generals could even block the bullets from his anti-aircraft guns with their sabers. After blocking for more than 10 seconds, the opponent's saber couldn't withstand the heavy load and broke into pieces. Only then was he beaten into a pile of minced meat. Some of the Great Xia practitioners used a pair of sabers to block the bullets from the anti-aircraft guns and were shot into the sky by Rinpochian. From this, one could see the strength of an Earthwheel expert. Whether it was his speed, reaction, or dynamic vision, he was no different from Superman. Although he had just attained the Earthwheel level, his speed was not only faster than that of the Aboriginals, but it was also faster than most of the beginner Earthwheel experts. This was his strongest suit. In the face of these armed soldiers, speed was far more important than strength. Moreover, his strength was enough to kill a person with one punch. It was also because of this that he made this crazy decision. As long as he wasn't surrounded by people shooting at him, there shouldn't be many who could threaten him. Along the way, many people looked in the direction of the gunshot, but they were dumbfounded to see a figure pass by them at an unimaginable speed. It was as if the distance was shortened in front of him. 100 meters, 2 seconds. 3,000 meters in 1 minute. A speed of 180 kilometers per hour. Before anyone could react, that figure had already appeared beside them from afar, and then disappeared without a trace. Rinpoche took less than a minute to arrive in front of a building and went in. After entering the building, Rinpoche finally stopped and gasped for breath. This speed was also a great burden for him. At this moment, the 2 guards in front of the main door reacted. They looked at each other in disbelief, shouted for their surroundings, and rushed in with their guns. This was a building that had been around for many years. After entering, there was only a small hall and 2 corridors that extended to both sides. Directly opposite the main door was a staircase. At this moment, there was a white man holding a towel in the hall and looking at Rinpoche in a daze. Just now, he seemed to have felt the wind, and then this person appeared in front of him. He was an Asian man. He wasn't considered tall, but he was very strong. It was very rare for an Asian to appear here. Although this base was shared with the Japan Self-Defense Forces, Japan occupied less than 20% of the area and wasn't in this area. Why would an Asian man come here? Who are you? Why are you here? This isn't a place you should be. The other party spoke in English, and Rinpoche could only understand the first sentence. Who are you? However, the other party didn't seem to have a good attitude. I am your grandpa. Rinpoche panted heavily, wiped the perspiration off his forehead, took a step forward, and landed a punch on the man's chest. The man felt as if he had been hit by a car, and even his internal organs spilled out. The 2 guards in front of the door saw this scene as soon as they rushed in. Without saying anything, they raised their guns and aimed at Rinpoche. As a result, they realized that the person in front of them was gone. Not good. This thought emerged in the minds of the 2 guards, but it was too late. Rinpoche directly grabbed the back of their heads and pressed them to the ground. Leaving the 3 corpses behind, Rinpoche first went up to the 2nd floor. Then, he leaned against the staircase railing and rested for half a minute. At the same time, he looked around. The corridors on both sides were filled with rooms, and there was almost no one in sight. Rinpoche pushed open a room. Inside was a bed with a few pairs of shoes and a television hanging on the wall. It looked like a dormitory. The few rooms he pushed open were the same. Rinpoche heard the noise coming from downstairs. The 2 guards shouted when they came in just now, and it seemed that other people had arrived. Rinpoche directly pushed open the window and jumped down. Behind him was a row of small buildings. He went straight into one of the rooms and saw a middle-aged white man sitting at a table looking at something. When he heard Rinpoche's voice, he raised his head and was obviously stunned for a moment. He wanted to speak, but Rinpoche didn't wait for him to speak and said, "I'm your uncle." With a leap, he stepped on the top of that person's head and gently landed on the ground. Looking at the military rank on the corpse's clothes, he was actually a lieutenant. Going up the stairs to the 2nd floor, there was a row of cabinets that contained all kinds of medicine. Next to a table and chair, there were 2 first aid kits. Further inside were 2 beds. It seemed that the person just now was a military doctor. Rinpoche first opened the window and listened to the sounds outside. Then, he sat on the bed to rest and think about his next move. Since he was prepared to make a big fuss, he definitely wasn't here to kill a few people. Just now, he saw a lot of parking aprons and runways. Behind the runways was a hangar, which was a good target. There were also those warships at the port. It would be even better if there were some ammunition depots. Before that, he had 2 things to do. One of them was to replenish his food supply. After all, the cultivation system in that world wasn't like the legendary cultivation system of immortality. Instead, everything was based on the amount of food one could eat. A battle consumed a lot of energy, and this energy was replenished by a lot of food. One couldn't fight on an empty stomach. Rinpoche was already feeling hungry now. Another thing was that he was still lacking a weapon. Golden spear, metal chain. Rinpoche called out in his mind. The metal chain emerged from the top of Rinpoche's head, bent downward, and reached in front of his eyes. As for the golden spear, it didn't react at all. The two of you have been living here for so long, and it's time for you to pay your rent. From now on, the two of you must be used by me. Otherwise, don't think that I can't deal with the two of you now. Once I reach the spirit will level, I will send the two of you back to the furnace to be reforged and erase your consciousness. Then, the two of you will cease to exist, Rinpoche said gloomily. At that time on the speedboat, he was really angry. These two fellows had been living in his sea of knowledge for so long, but they weren't of any use at all. What was the point of keeping them? Following Rinpoche's gloomy words, the metal chain immediately trembled. As long as it had consciousness, it was most afraid of having its consciousness erased, which meant death. Chapter 719. Heaven-grade weapons were condensed from the soul. Although they could be condensed into a physical body in the outside world, their essence was still the soul. They were connected to the owner like limbs. If the owner died, the soul would disappear, and the heaven-grade weapon would naturally disappear. It was just like how a person's physical body would disappear if they lost their life. However, the metal chain and the golden spear were somewhat different. These two heaven-grade weapons were brought back to Earth from another world when their owners were still alive. Rinpoche cut off their connection with their owners. However, their owners didn't die, and the heaven-grade weapons didn't disappear either. This resulted in the two heaven-grade weapons not disappearing. Heaven-grade weapons were condensed from the soul, and in some ways, they could be seen as part of a person's soul. After cutting off their connection with their owners, the originally dead heaven-grade weapons gave birth to an ignorant consciousness. In order to avoid losing the support of the owner's soul and collapsing, they instinctively chose Rinpoche, lodged in his consciousness, and relied on his soul to survive. Although these two heaven-grade weapons had their own consciousness, it was more of an instinct, just like a child learning how to speak. Their greatest consciousness was to continue existing. Therefore, the two of them had been staying in Rinpoche's sea of knowledge. As long as his life wasn't in danger, they wouldn't come out. This was because they had been in his body for such a long time and had been contaminated with his spirit. If he died, the two of them would most likely dissipate. Other than this matter that concerned the survival of these two heaven-grade weapons, they didn't care about anything else. This was because if something happened to them outside, Rinpoche's soul wouldn't be able to support repairing them. Therefore, they were very timid. Now that Rinpoche threatened them, the two heaven-grade weapons could naturally feel his determination. When a very timid person was threatened, there were usually only two situations that would occur. One was to explode, and the other was to continue being timid. The two heaven-grade weapons immediately chose the second option and continued to be timid. A spear grew out of Rinpoche's right hand. It was 7 feet 2 inches long and was close to 4 meters. It weighed about 50 kilograms, was silver in color, and was covered with golden veins. As Rinpoche turned the spear in his hand, the body of the spear shone with a golden light. This was the heaven-grade weapon of Tongyu, the fourth most powerful spear in the world. When Rinpoche held the spear handle in his hand, it actually felt slightly elastic and not as cold as iron. He reached out and poked at the wall. Almost without feeling any resistance, he pierced a hole in the wall. He pulled it back, and the sunlight shone in through the hole. "Good spear," Rinpoche exclaimed. In reality, how would he know what a good gun was? The spear of the fourth strongest expert in the world must be good. Moreover, the sharpness of the blade could be considered good. After saying this, Rinpoche's eyebrows twitched, his gaze focused, and he thrust his spear again. This shot wasn't as sloppy as the previous one. It was as fast as lightning. Even those who didn't know anything would be able to tell that these two shots were very different. If one were to say that the first shot was just a layman's act, Then this shot was made with strength in his legs and a twist of his body, which was extremely pleasing to the eye. Rinpoche pulled his spear back after thrusting it out. He held the spear with both hands and actually shook it again. The entire room was filled with specks of cold light, and the sound of the spear piercing through the air whistled through the room. Rinpoche consecutively used the spear techniques of thrusting, shaking, flower dancing, piercing, and poking. Only then did he stop and stand still with ecstasy in his eyes. This spear actually came with skills. Just now, when he held the spear in his hands, some things appeared in his mind. The basics of spear techniques were thrusting, grasping, and blocking. After these things entered his mind, he immediately understood many things. In addition to the basics of thrusting, grasping, and blocking, there were also the evolved thrusting, whipping, twisting, circling, pouncing, poking, flower dancing, and so on. The spear in his hands seemed to have immediately become a part of his body. With just a thought, he naturally knew how to exert force. It was as if he had been imbued with wisdom. Even though he wasn't considered proficient and needed to control his body to do it, it was far better than holding the spear and randomly thrusting it. If he didn't guess wrongly, these things were left behind by the spirit spear Tongyu. They were his insights into spear techniques. Surprise, it was simply a surprise. Rinpoche had never thought that there would be such a good thing. There was actually a novice gift bag. At this time, this novice gift bag was simply too timely. It could be said that Rinpoche's original combat strength was 10, and his random thrusting with a stick was 11. Now, it had jumped to 15. This was the inside of the fourth most powerful expert in the world. He had picked up a big bargain. After walking around the room a few times and making a few movements with the spear in his hands, Rinpoche finally suppressed his excitement. Then, he looked at the metal chain that was swimming around his arm like a snake. He grabbed one end of the metal chain, but it immediately wrapped tightly around his arm and wouldn't let go no matter what. "Did you hide anything good?" Rinpoche laughed. The metal chain desperately tried to break free from Rinpoche's grasp, followed his arm, and wrapped around his waist. "What time is it? If you have something good, quickly take it out." However, the metal chain still didn't respond. Could it be that the metal chain doesn't have these things? Rinpoche pondered for a while. After all, there were only the golden spear and the metal chain, and there were no other references. He also didn't know why the golden spear left these things behind, but the metal chain didn't. Rinpoche felt that there were two possibilities. First, Tongyu was too powerful. After all, he was the fourth most powerful expert in the world. Whether it was the strength of his spirit or his willpower, he was far superior to ordinary spirit will experts. Therefore, when he practiced the spear every day, some of his insights were left in the golden spear, forming an inextinguishable mark. Therefore, when the golden spear was in his hand, those insights were transmitted to his mind. After all, the essence of the golden spear was still the spirit, a part of Tongyu's spirit. Second, the usage of the metal chain was different from that of the golden spear. The golden spear was Tongyu's weapon. Whether it was practicing or fighting, the golden spear almost never left his hand and completely carried Tongyu's will. The metal chain was different because it was actually a rope that could move. For example, the golden spear was a weapon, while the metal chain was a magic treasure that could be thrown out to bind people. Therefore, there wasn't anything that could be carried on the golden spear. Rinpoche felt that both of these possibilities were possible, and both of them made sense. Unfortunately, there were only these two heaven-grade weapons and no previous cases to look for, so he didn't know if his guess was correct. However, no matter what, he had profited a lot. At this moment, an alarm sounded in the base, directly interrupting Rinpoche's thoughts. It seems that the entire base is going to be mobilized. It's time for me to change locations. Rinpoche leaned against the window and looked outside. Chapter 720. Base in a room. So many people just for one person. The old man who rushed over was surprised when he heard the other party's words. He thought that something big had happened. He hurriedly climbed out of the little vixen's bed, and it turned out to be for one person? Sounded the alarm because of one person? If the news got out, the entire base would become a joke. This is a big deal. Don't underestimate this person. Surrounded by 4 special forces, he only used a few seconds to kill 7 people and injure 6. This is not something a human can do. Take a look at the photos of the scene. Another person turned on the computer, and there were a few photos of the scene that were uploaded to the computer. One of the people in the worst condition, even his head was missing. This was done with his bare hands. Before that, the other party was more than 10 meters away from him. Then, the other party rushed into the team behind him and killed another 6 people before anyone could fight back. All of them had multiple broken bones and ruptured internal organs. They died on the spot. It was like being hit by a truck. This was done by one person. The old man was a little surprised when he saw the picture on the computer. He could tell at a glance that it was a helipad. It was an open space without any shelter. In such a situation, he killed 7 people and seriously injured 6? He's very strong, much stronger than a heavyweight boxer. More importantly, he was fast. After doing so many things in a few seconds, he actually ran away at an incredible speed. According to the last footage of him, this speed was 100 meters in 2 seconds. Are you sure you're not joking with me? The old man was shocked. I also hope it's a joke. Look at this. It's a clip from the surveillance camera. The man opened another video file. At the 5-second mark, the old man focused on the image on the video. He saw 2 soldiers standing there looking in a certain direction. Then, when the time was up to 5 seconds, suddenly a figure rushed into the image and disappeared before he could react. Then, the man played the video in slow motion again and again. Only then did he gradually see the situation of the person running in the image. Because of the camera, the figure was very blurry and couldn't be seen clearly. But his eyebrows were already furrowed. He had already understood the problem. Who is this person? What the higher-ups want should be related to the biochemical experiments in China. I'm guessing he's a successful product. His strength, explosiveness, and speed were far beyond that of a normal person. If this was the progress of the Chinese biochemical experiments, then the situation was indeed very serious. This person was previously in charge of the CIA, and he needs to transfer here to return to his country. Now it's our job. I just spoke to Washington on the phone. He must be caught alive. As he spoke, the light on the communicator on the table lit up. After he pressed it, a voice came from the communicator. Sir, there's a new discovery. Lieutenant Kent in the back of dormitory block C was killed, and there are some problems with the wall on the 2nd floor. The enemy might have a weapon we don't know about. I've already asked someone to send you the pictures. At this moment, Rinpochian was eating raw beef in the kitchen. He didn't have much time. He had been seen outside just now. Although he had killed the other party, the corpse would soon be discovered. He forcefully stuffed 1 kilogram of raw beef into his stomach to make his stomach feel better. Rinpochian found something to wrap another 20 kilograms of raw beef before jumping out of the window. 3 soldiers were searching with their guns when they suddenly saw someone jump out of the rear window of the restaurant about 30 meters away. The 3 of them immediately stopped and raised their guns. At the same time, they said SEAL Team 6, Group 3, found a target. The coordinates are da-da-da. As soon as Rinpochian landed on the ground, he pounced on the 3 like a cheetah. Faced with Rinpochian's speed, the other party didn't even have time to speak and immediately opened fire. Ding, ding, ding. A gold and silver rod suddenly appeared in Rinpochian's hand and shielded his body. A series of bullets hit the golden spear. Godly spear. Rinpochian suddenly twisted his body to dodge a few bullets and threw the spear in his hand. Like a gold and silver lightning bolt, it directly pierced through one of the soldiers. The other 2 were sweating profusely and couldn't care less about their companion's life. Rinpochian's speed was too fast. He continuously changed his figure on the ground and closed in on them like a phantom. Damn it, he's not human at all. One of them looked at Rinpochian, who was getting closer and closer with a face full of fear. Using a rod to block bullets? He can even dodge bullets? Damn it, where did that rod come from? At this moment, a metal chain grew out of Rinpochian's hand. In an instant, it grew by 10 meters and wrapped around the neck of one of the soldiers. Gotcha! That person's neck was immediately broken. Rinpoche leaped and landed behind the other party. After the metal chain broke the first person's neck, it followed Rinpoche's movements and wrapped around the last person's neck. After killing all three of them, Rinpoche walked to the bodies of the three and rummaged through them. He originally wanted to see if there were any grenades or flash grenades, but the other party only had guns, ammunition, and a military knife. If it was in the past, he would naturally take the other party's gun for granted. However, in the current situation, it was more of a burden to hold on to it. As long as he used it, his position would be exposed, so it was more convenient to use the golden spear and metal chain. Rinpoche turned around to pick up the golden spear. When it fell into his hand, the golden spear trembled incessantly. It seemed to be very angry at Rinpoche for throwing it out just now. However, Rinpoche didn't care. Just as he walked to the corner of a building, he suddenly stopped. He heard footsteps, and 6 people were jogging over from the other end of the corner. They were about 11 to 12 meters away. 1, 2, 3, Rinpoche counted in his heart. When the other party was about to reach the corner, he suddenly rushed out and pierced the person in front with the golden spear in his hand. Rinpoche pulled out the golden spear and shook it to produce 3 cold stars. The heads of the 3 people closest to him immediately had holes in them. The last 2 people were already staring at Rinpoche in fear. Rinpoche immediately grabbed a corpse and used it to block in front of him. Da-da-da. A silver snake stretched out from Rinpoche's hand again and directly broke the neck of a person 6 meters away. Rinpoche carried the corpse and rushed to the front of the last person and pulled out his spear. The gunshots stopped. The other party was a young man in his early 20s. He looked Asian and still had a little immaturity on his face. The tip of the spear was pressed against his neck. His head kept breaking out in cold sweat, and his face was full of fear. Rinpoche stuck his head out from behind the corpse and looked at the other party. "Where's the headquarters?" Don Tikelo, that young man, had a look of despair on his face. Rinpoche exerted a little force in his hand, and blood spurted out from the other party's throat. Chapter 721. The Zuoshibo Naval Base covered an area of 405 hectares for million square meters and had a total length of 62 kilometers. 86% of it was used by that Western country, and the original owner of the base only used 14% of it. In the past, although the base was busy, it was orderly. However, it was very different today. Groups of soldiers armed with live ammunition searched the base wantonly, and it was quite chaotic. This puzzled the self-defense forces and made them think of ways to find out what was going on. However, they didn't expect that there was only one person who caused this disturbance. Rinpoche flicked his wrist, twisted the spear, and pulled it out of the other party's throat. In addition to the sound of blood spurting out, there was also the sound of air leaking. Rinpoche inexplicably thought of saying, "I once heard that if the knife is fast enough, the sound of blood spurting out from the wound is like the sound of the wind. It's very pleasant to hear." When Rinpoche saw this saying, he inexplicably felt a little sad, but also a little aesthetic. Now that he really heard such a sound, he didn't feel anything. It was as if he had killed a chicken. He had died so many times. He had drowned, burned, died of thirst, and died so many times. How could he feel? There were 8 people lying around him, and he didn't fire a single shot. This was already the 11th batch, and Rinpoche was getting more and more comfortable. Whether it was killing people or shooting, he was getting faster and faster. Relying on his extraordinary 5 senses, Rinpoche was always able to ambush the other party at the right place. At close range, these people were now like weeds in his hands. Rinpoche pushed open the door with a gun in one hand and looked outside. There were more and more people nearby, and it seemed like the other party was shrinking the encirclement. Previously, when he killed 2 groups of soldiers, he was still relatively leisurely. However, as time passed, there were more and more teams searching around him, and he paid more attention to hiding his whereabouts. What he didn't know was that the other party didn't immediately search for him. Instead, they set up an encirclement. They were afraid that he would run away. After that, they began to search this area wantonly. Now, the entire base was mobilized. In addition to the encirclement, a total of 2,000 soldiers were sent to this area to search for him. Over there, in the opposite building, a man walked into a room, saw Rinpoche, who was standing at the opposite window, and immediately reported his location. Rinpoche could already hear the sound of people running downstairs. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he waited at the corner of the staircase. He is waiting for them to come up. Although the other party had begun to lighten his footsteps, it still couldn't escape his ears. The two combat squads hurried over from upstairs and downstairs respectively. After exchanging hand signals, they prepared their battle stances and slowly advanced. After leaving the room, he arrived at the corridor filled with corpses. He pushed open the window and jumped out. Not down, but up. He jumped 6 or 7 meters high, almost at the same level as the roof. At the same time, he turned around and swung his hand. A silver chain was immediately thrown out and wrapped around the drainage pipe on the roof. Rinpoche pulled himself close to the wall, kicked off the wall, and flipped to the roof. This was a new usage that he had just come up with. In the complex environment of the base, the use of the metal chain was not limited to killing people. He could even pretend to be Peter Parker. He's up there. He ran to the rooftop. Rinpoche landed on the rooftop and sized up the surroundings. There were many buildings nearby. A few of them were about the same height as where he was, and the distance between them was also less than 20 meters. This was the distance that he could currently reach. 17 meters was the furthest he could jump after a run-up. If the metal chain was wrapped around something to give him strength, he could only use it for 9 meters at most. That was about 26 meters. He looked into the distance and found some problems. There were many rows of soldiers standing around, holding guns and aiming in this direction. They were in an open space that surrounded the building area. Am I surrounded? Rinpoche wasn't too nervous after discovering this. Instead, he ran in another direction and jumped over a distance of more than 10 meters in one leap. He didn't even need to use the metal chain. There are people in this direction too. Rinpoche moved quickly on the rooftop and soon found that he was indeed surrounded. There seemed to be about 1,000 people in each direction. There were almost 3 people every 10 meters, forming a large net that firmly sealed off this area. From the looks of it, they were going to seal him in these buildings. Unfortunately, you won't be able to do as you wish. Rinpoche smiled. The direction in front of him was a 2-lane road, and the soldiers were setting up a perimeter below. On the other side of the road, there was still a 4-story building that was less than 25 meters away. This meant that it was still within his range of movement. Their blockade was useful for ordinary people, and he would be greatly restricted before using the metal chain. However, it wasn't much of a threat to him now. More importantly, there was a row of warehouses not far from that small building. He just didn't know if they were warehouses for supplies or ammunition. Rinpoche stood on the rooftop and looked ahead. He suddenly felt a chill down his spine. Someone is aiming at me, Rinpoche thought to himself. He then fiercely pointed his gun to the right. Ding! A spark appeared in the air. Then he heard gunshots in the distance. Is it a sniper? Is the target my right leg? Rinpoche looked in that direction and saw a lighthouse. Unfortunately, he couldn't see who was on it. Rinpoche stood with his gun, turned his head, and revealed a cold smile in that direction. If the other party was a little closer, he would let them know what a flying shot from outer space was. Unfortunately, they were too far away. Rinpoche then took 2 steps forward and leaped forward. When he reached a certain distance, he threw out the metal chain and immediately pulled himself to the opposite rooftop. He just jumped over everyone's heads and disappeared from the sniper's field of vision. On the lighthouse in the distance, a man lay prone behind a sniper rifle and couldn't close his mouth for a long time. What did he just see? The other party actually used that stick in his hand to block the bullet. Furthermore, he did it after he fired the gun. Was the other party faster than a bullet? He's up there. He jumped over. Oh my god, is he Spider-Man? Rinpochian had just jumped over when chaos broke out behind him. Rinpochian's speed was so fast that he passed by in a flash. Even if the people below kept staring at the top of their heads, they could only see a faint figure. Even if they saw him, they wouldn't be able to stop him. Just like that, he easily broke through the encirclement set up by the other party using thousands of people. On one hand, the environment of this base was very complicated. Other than the port area, there were many multi-story buildings in other places. This made it very convenient for Rinpochian to move around without any hindrance, but it hindered the footsteps of others. On the other hand, the other party wasn't used to fighting with extraordinary opponents. Even though they had repeatedly overestimated Rinpochian, this overestimation was still within the scope of their understanding of cyborgs. For example, he was stronger and faster. Chapter 722. Damn it, he actually managed to get away. Can he jump more than 20 meters? And has a chain in his hand? Like Spider-Man? Does he have any weaknesses? You don't know? Hundreds of people have died, and you give me this answer? Expand the encirclement and contact Okinawa. We can't care about that now. We have to mobilize the army, or else we won't be able to form a sufficient encirclement. I'll call the headquarters first. A man in the headquarters of Zhua, Shirbao Base flew into a rage. He originally didn't want to mobilize the army. After all, if a few thousand people couldn't catch him, the entire navy would become a joke. However, judging from the current situation, Rinpochian was a little tricky. He was like a monkey that couldn't be caught. He was also extremely ruthless. In just a few encounters, he had lost hundreds of people, and all of them died on the spot. Now that Rinpochian had moved to a larger area, it would be more difficult to encircle him. Compared to the escape of such an important target, he couldn't care less about his reputation. There were 28,000 people in the Okinawa barracks. Even if a portion of them were transferred over, they would be able to form a sufficiently strong encirclement. After finishing the call, he looked up and said, "Place snipers at all the commanding heights. Also, I want him alive. General, given the current situation, there will be more casualties if we capture him alive. Actually, corpses can also be used for research. The higher-ups won't agree. His existence shows that China has completely surpassed our country in biochemical research. In order to obtain China's research data, we have to send him back to Washington alive, no matter how great the sacrifice is. If China completely surpasses our country in this aspect, the sacrifices won't be limited to these people. However, if we don't shoot, given the target's skills, we definitely won't be able to catch him, and he might even escape. Therefore, try to shoot at non-vital points." Understood. The other person immediately understood. Bullets had no eyes. If they hit a vital point, there was nothing they could do. It was better than letting him escape. Rinpochian licked his fingertips and swallowed the last piece of beef. In just half a day, he had devoured the 20 kilograms of raw beef. Although it didn't taste good, and he didn't like to eat raw food, it didn't feel good to be hungry. Now, he was worried about what he would eat. The consumption of energy during the battle was too high, and the energy contained in the food on Earth was too low. It seemed that he had to find some food after dark. After finishing the last bit of beef, Rinpochian stood up and looked around. This was a depression in the roof of the two warehouses, and it was very difficult to see this place from other directions. As for the warehouses below, he took a look at one of them. It was filled with all sorts of marine machinery, and he was not interested in it. There are footsteps below. 1, 2, 3, 16 people. Are they two combat squads moving together? Rinpochian slowly walked to the edge and peeked out. More than a dozen people were slowly advancing in a battle formation. There were people watching in almost all directions, and one of them was looking in the direction where Rinpochian was. Up there, Rinpochian retracted his head and headed in another direction. Since they had discovered their location, the others would soon surround them. There are people here too? There are a total of 8 teams. Rinpochian only took a glance in another direction before retreating. However, he was still discovered by the other party. 8 squads were split into 4 groups and searching in this direction. Each group was only 50 meters apart. At the same time, Ren Bachien felt that he was being targeted again. It was still a sniper, but this time, one was on the lighthouse and the other was on a building in the distance. This is a little troublesome. Ren Bachien quickly retreated into the depression between the 2 warehouse roofs and muttered to himself. Looking at the 2 sides of the warehouse roofs that protruded into arcs, Ren Bachien suddenly had an idea. The roof of this warehouse was a layer of iron sheet, and the bottom was completely hollow. In other words, the entire warehouse was a layer of iron sheet, which was also known as an iron sheet house in China. Ren Bachien used the tip of his spear to draw a circle at the side, leaving only a little bit. Then, he flicked the tip of his spear to the side. In front of him was a circular hole that had a diameter of 1 meter. Ren Bachien took a glance at the bottom and immediately jumped down. The metal chain wrapped around the beam, and Ren Bachien's body paused for a moment. Then, he released the metal chain from the beam above and gently landed on the ground. Ren Bachien bypassed the rows of wooden boxes, walked to the back door of the warehouse, and listened carefully to the sounds outside. There were 16 people in this direction just now. Ren Bachien heard the sound of suppressed breathing coming from the metal plate of the warehouse. 2 people, Ren Bachien thought to himself. It seemed like these people had split up. Ren Bachien took a step back and stabbed the spear in his hand twice. The 2 people outside didn't expect the danger to suddenly come from the warehouse wall that they were sticking to. When the tip of the spear emerged from their chests, they looked down. Cannon! Alpha! Cries of alarm immediately came from afar. The 2 of them fell to the ground one after the other. Without hesitation, the people who had split up immediately fired at the warehouse, creating countless bullet holes in the metal sheet. At this time, Ren Bachien had already changed his position. He came to the side of the warehouse, then made a cut on the metal sheet and moved it aside. There was a door that he could enter and exit through. This was a similar warehouse. There were a total of 38 such warehouses in this row. Ren Bachien passed through the warehouses until he finally made a cut on the metal sheet. What he saw wasn't a warehouse full of equipment and wooden boxes, but a grassy field. On the other side of the grassy field were hundreds of soldiers. All of them were pointing their guns at him. "You have been surrounded," a man shouted at Ren Bachien in broken Mandarin. Ren Bachien retreated in a flash, then leaped into the air and hung himself on a beam with a metal chain. Countless bullet holes suddenly appeared on the warehouse wall below him. Rays of sunlight shone into the warehouse through the bullet holes, forming a beam of light. Ren Bachien squatted on a steel beam, and his expression was no longer as relaxed as before. It seemed like this direction wasn't going to work. If he wanted to break through this grassy field in this direction, he would have to cover at least 50 meters. Furthermore, there were hundreds of soldiers armed with live ammunition. If he were to escape from here, it would be a competition of whether he or the other party's guns were faster. As for behind him, he would definitely be surrounded. In fact, there were already people chasing after him from the warehouse behind him by pressing on the doors that he had opened. With the help of the terrain of the warehouse, as long as he didn't go out, he should be able to hold on for some time. However, he was just like a turtle in a jar. It would be useless even if he could hold on until nighttime. As long as the other party moved the searchlights over, they would be able to illuminate this area as if it were daytime. As time passed, the other party's encirclement would be more complete, and it would be almost impossible for him to break through at night. It would be great if he had a few smoke grenades. Chapter 723. I didn't find anything here. I don't have any here either. There's a hole in the north wall. It seems like the other party has left from here. Inside the warehouse where Ren Bachien had killed his men, 2 teams of fully armed soldiers were searching. This is Team 4 of 3rd Platoon. The target isn't at Warehouse 6. It's heading north. Got it. Be careful. A few minutes later. Team 4, please respond if you copy. Team 4, roger that. Please go ahead. The target has appeared. He's appeared in Warehouse 38. Currently, Second Platoon and Team 5 and 6 have set up interception points in Warehouse 25, further reducing the enemy's range of action. Your mission is to head to Warehouse 25 with Team 5 immediately. Roger that. Be careful. The opponent is very good at fighting in a small area. Don't give him a chance to get close to you. Understood. Did you hear that? Let's hurry to Warehouse number 25. Go. However, as soon as they reached Warehouse 9, they heard gunshots coming from the front. Within a minute, the gunshots stopped. At this moment, Ren Bachien was rummaging through the corpses in a warehouse. He didn't expect the other party to set up so quickly, and he was ambushed as soon as he came out. Although he could block bullets now, even if he had 2 more hands, he wouldn't be able to block a dozen people shooting at the same time, not to mention a repeating rifle. Fortunately, there were all kinds of wooden boxes and equipment in the warehouse, which became the biggest obstacle for the enemy. TSK, these chest muscles. It's a woman. Ren Bachien rummaged through it and felt a little surprised. Lifting his head to look at the corpse, he saw that it was a golden-haired woman with a pair of hollow eyes. Before she could even react, Zhang Xian's spear had already pierced through her forehead. To him, it didn't matter if the soldiers were male or female. They were all dead anyway. However, he didn't expect it to be a mix of male and female soldiers. 2 of them were female, and the rest were male. There was no smoke grenade he wanted. Thinking about it, the smoke grenades had no effect on him. Instead, it would affect their own vision. Naturally, they wouldn't bring this thing. He didn't even have a bulletproof vest. It was the same as smoke grenades. It was inconvenient to move around wearing them, so it was better not to wear them. He had to find 2 flash grenades. Ren Bachien hung the flash grenade on his body, carried his gun, and shuttled back and forth in the warehouse like a phantom. After quickly passing through a few warehouses, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. He seemed to have heard something. He quietly jumped onto a shelf and poked his head out to take a look. Sure enough, he saw a few soldiers slowly advancing in a battle formation, constantly looking around vigilantly. Ren Bachien landed on the ground, held his spear upside down, and walked forward slowly. He was looking for a suitable ambush position. A moment later, he arrived in front of a shelf. Unlike the other shelves, this shelf was fully filled with items. It could block him, and the other party would come face to face with him when he turned around. It was the perfect place to ambush. After that, Ren Bachien quietly waited for the few prey that were about to fall into his claws. He even had the leisure to think about what to eat for dinner, although he could only think about it. At this moment, the encirclement was finally completed. Thousands of soldiers surrounded the 38 warehouses tightly. With a creaking sound, the doors of the warehouses began to open one by one. A large number of soldiers poured into warehouse number 38 and number 15, which this group of soldiers had just passed by. After searching the area, they advanced toward warehouses 16 and 37 through the wall that Ren Bachien had cut open. Ren Bachien was in warehouse 17. When he heard the sound of warehouse 16 being opened, Ren Bachien quickly realized that the other party was well prepared, which was why they were acting so wantonly. Ren Bachien hesitated for a moment. He heard footsteps coming from not far away, then quietly returned to warehouse 18 and ran in another direction. Not long after, he heard the sound of a search coming from another direction. Ren Bachien's heart trembled. He changed his direction and looked out through the gap of the warehouse door. Sure enough, there were soldiers aiming their guns at him. Although it was just a gap and he couldn't see the whole picture, he could see quite a number of soldiers. He also saw a squad machine gun, which was quite a threat. Is this a turtle in a jar? Ren Bachien smacked his lips. It seemed like he had made a mistake in choosing this warehouse. With so many people, if he were to rush out, not to mention the protection of a heaven-grade weapon, even if he had the protection of a deity, he would still be turned into a sieve. How did those great Xia practitioners die? His death definitely wouldn't be as good as theirs. However, the other party's movements were really fast. Could it be that he had to surrender? He didn't know if the other party had prepared a seduction for him. This was interesting, and he might just give in. Would the Empress beat him up? I was forced to do it. Thinking about it this way, surrendering didn't seem too bad. Please don't torture me. I'm really not afraid of pain. Although he was surrounded, Rinpoche didn't feel nervous and was still in the mood to think about all sorts of things. However, it seems like I don't have to surrender yet. Rinpoche's eyes lit up when he saw a large pile of oil barrels in a corner of the warehouse. Listen up, you have been surrounded. I'll give you 10 minutes to consider whether you want to surrender or meet God. Rinpoche recognized the owner of this voice. It was the brown-haired man on the speedboat. However, he didn't have time to care about him now, as he was busy looking for something. When he was ready, he first opened a few barrels of diesel and poured it on the other barrels. Then, he kicked over 20 barrels of diesel over. Diesel gushed out of the barrels and flowed all over the ground. He slowly wrapped a piece of cotton cloth around a piece of wood to make a torch. Although diesel was flammable, it wasn't easy to ignite. For example, it was very difficult to ignite with a lighter or a match. However, it was possible to use a torch. Furthermore, he covered the ground with the cotton cloth that he had just found, which became flammable after being stained with diesel. The important thing was that he had at least 1,000 barrels of diesel, which occupied most of the corners of the warehouse and could fit several containers. Unfortunately, there were cotton cloth in the warehouse that could be used to make a torch. He could also use capillaries to let the cotton cloth absorb the diesel and ignite it like a wick. The lighter was from the corpse, and he didn't pay much attention to it before. He even specially went to retrieve it. Rinpoche lit the torch in his hand and threw it into the pile of diesel. He watched as the torch slowly ignited the cotton cloth that was stained with diesel oil on the ground. Then, he quickly ran past 3 warehouses, found a seemingly safer corner, dug a hole, and jumped in. The brown-haired man was still using a loudspeaker to persuade them to surrender. Outside the 38 warehouses were thousands of soldiers armed with live ammunition, vigilantly watching their own territory. Hundreds of soldiers were searching the center from 2 directions. Boom! Boom! A series of huge explosions suddenly occurred, and the huge explosions directly blew the warehouses away. Some of the diesel barrels were even like fireballs that were covered in diesel and flames. They were blown hundreds of meters away before exploding. Countless debris, warehouse fragments, and metal barrels turned into powerful weapons during the explosion and swept toward the crowd of soldiers outside. There was also the heat wave of the explosion that directly threw everyone to the ground. It was chaos. The sudden explosion caught everyone off guard. In particular, those burning diesel barrels exploded at close range like cannonballs. The power was no different from cannonballs, and people were thrown off their feet wherever they went. The 2 warehouses next to each other were turned into a sea of fire. At this moment, the door of another warehouse was suddenly kicked open from the inside. While everyone was still recovering from the explosion, a person rushed into the crowd like a tiger rushing into a flock of sheep. 3 seconds. Without this explosion, these 3 seconds would have turned Rinpoche into a sieve. At this moment, Rinpoche successfully rushed into the crowd. The pistol in his right hand was like a dragon, shooting out cold stars and piercing the throats of people one by one. The metal chain in his left hand was like a rope that wrapped around the necks of several people. Rinpoche swung it hard and immediately smashed them like a weapon. Many elite soldiers were terrified. The person in front of them was like a monster. He was so fast that they couldn't keep up with him. He was also so strong that human bodies were like straws in his hands. Everyone even began to run away. In the face of such a monster, there was only one way to escape. Rinpoche flipped and maneuvered in the crowd. He followed the crowd for dozens of meters before suddenly changing direction and crashing into the window of a building more than 10 meters away. Chapter 724. At night, the entire base was brightly lit. All the lights were turned on, and searchlights were patrolling the area. Vehicles with headlights were driving slowly in the base. Soldiers were standing guard in all the dark corners. Even so, they still couldn't catch that man, that yellow man. No one had ever thought that one person could cause such a huge commotion in the base. No one had ever thought that one person could be so powerful and dangerous. The Okinawa military camp nearby had sent reinforcements twice, and now there were a total of 17,000 people searching around the base. However, that man was like a ghost. From time to time, one could hear traces of him and a few gunshots. When the people nearby arrived, they would only see the corpses scattered on the ground. Or, by the time a soldier was found, he was already dead, stabbed to death, or strangled to death by a metal chain. Yes, a metal chain and a cold weapon, a long spear. Nowadays, a team of 50 to 100 people usually operated. However, such a large team operation made the base look like a sieve. From 3 o'clock in the afternoon until now, only 6 hours had passed, and more than 600 people had died in battle. Less than 200 of them had died in the explosion. The rest had died in the hands of that bastard. Now that they thought of that bastard, they gritted their teeth. If they could catch him, they would skin him alive, even if they had to sacrifice their lives. Behind this was the fear in everyone's hearts. Even the army reinforcements that came last were tongue-tied and felt a chill down their spines when they found out about what had happened. At this time, the orders from above had also changed. Previously, they had to capture him alive, but later, they tried to capture him alive. Now, they were to attack immediately upon sight, as long as the corpses were left behind. "I'm hungry." Rinpochian rubbed his stomach, which was growling. After arriving at this base, he had already snatched food 4 times, at least 30 kilograms of beef. However, he was still so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back. The food that entered his stomach was converted into essence blood, and then essence chi that dispersed throughout his body, consumed along with his movements. Now that the canteens were stationed with troops, he definitely couldn't go there. Rinpochian felt that if this went on, he would end up eating soil. He didn't know if his stomach could digest soil now. Rinpochian sat in the dark, plucking grass from the ground and stuffing it into his mouth. It tasted worse than raw beef. Rinpochian's face twitched, and his expression was extremely rich. "Eat grass. I'm not an alpaca." Moreover, this thing was unpalatable and had no nutrition. It would turn into air once it entered his stomach. He had already pulled out a patch of grass, but it was still useless. She sighed faintly, her face full of grievance. Who did he offend? A person sitting in a carriage can cause trouble to fall from the sky. If Rinpochian wanted to leave now, he could still find an opportunity. However, he was no longer in a hurry. Anyway, the night was still long. There was always an opportunity. He was prepared to make a big firecracker. After fighting for half a day, Rinpochian felt that he had gained a lot. He was now able to drift, hide, search, and assassinate like a shadow in the darkness. Although they were only facing some elite soldiers from Earth. However, this was something that he couldn't do in the past. He didn't even think that he could do this. Although the experience this time was a little unfair, it was very valuable in terms of results. Especially in terms of combat and killing, he began to have his own experiences and ideas. People were forced to do so. In the current environment, Rinpochian couldn't help but think about how to hide his whereabouts and how to fight. As a searchlight swept past, only a patch of bare grass was left. A group of soldiers rushed over with tactical flashlights and saw the bare grass on the ground. They immediately discovered something and said, "He has been here." However, at this moment, a metal chain suddenly swung out from the darkness and wrapped around the necks of 2 people. Kacha! Accompanied by the sound of bones breaking, the 2 people fell to the ground weakly. "He's here!" The remaining people were horrified and immediately fired at the front while shouting. Rinpochian flashed behind a tree and disappeared into the darkness. He avoided the other soldiers, took a detour, and appeared near a row of hangars, not far from the dock. Although there were soldiers patrolling and searching here, the number of soldiers was much smaller than in other places. Rinpochian waited in the dark for more than 10 minutes. Then, he found a gap and used 5 seconds to cross 200 meters in front of him. He stuck to the shadow of the hangar, slowed down his breathing, and waited quietly until there was a gap before a searchlight swept past and the patrolling soldiers. He then jumped up and threw the metal chain to pull himself above the hangar. After that, he chased after the searchlight for a while until it drew an arc in front of him and turned in another direction. He then jumped to the ground in front of him, rolled over, and quickly ran to the dock. Then, he quickly took off his clothes and jumped into the sea. He didn't even leave his underpants on and held them up so that they wouldn't leave any watermarks on his body when he got on the ship. His target was the ship by the sea. The largest warship looked like an aircraft carrier. Rendezvous naturally didn't know that it was an amphibious assault ship. He just felt that it looked big and thought that it must have a powerful weapon on it. In fact, he had another target that looked like the enemy's headquarters. Unfortunately, there were too many soldiers around, and he had almost no chance to sneak in. Even if he rushed in, it wouldn't be easy to get out. Therefore, he settled for the next best thing, which was this warship that looked very valuable. He didn't know if the number of troops at the headquarters would decrease after blowing up this place. The people on the shore are still searching, but the entire base is actually in chaos because of one person. Is he a Superman, or is he Batman? I can't believe that a normal person can do such a thing. Two soldiers stood near the side of the ship and vigilantly scanned all the positions on the dock. From time to time, they would look up at the chaos in the distance. Maybe he's Wonder Woman. The other person added, I like Wonder Woman's face and butt. That person immediately laughed. In any case, we have to be careful. Watch the shore and don't let him sneak in. Why not in the sea? Goodman Richard is 18 meters above the water, which is equivalent to the height of a 6-story building. Can he fly up? Although it is said that he can jump very high. Do you believe that someone can jump more than 10 meters from the water? In that case, I believe that he's Wonder Woman. The yellow-skinned Wonder Woman? I don't believe it. Zwasherbao. 24 people were scattered in the dark, looking at the vehicles that were rushing to and fro. The lady boss is inside? What are we waiting for? Let's rush in and snatch her back. A burly man said in a low, muffled voice. He had a simple and honest face and a pair of small eyes that looked ferocious. Wait a moment. They're still searching everywhere, which means that Mr. Rin isn't in danger for the time being. His face was twitching. There were soldiers armed with live ammunition everywhere inside. According to the information they received, there were more than 10,000 of them. How could they rush in? Along the way, they had really worried themselves to death in order to appease these masters. If it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't beat them, fine, they couldn't beat them. How could this group of people be so fierce? Thinking back to what they saw at the base, one of them sent a companion who was about the same strength as him flying with a slap as if he was swatting a fly. The thought of it made their hearts turn cold. However, they rather admired him for not being caught after such a long time despite being searched by more than 10,000 people. They didn't know how he did it. According to reliable sources, he had also killed many people. This made everyone admire him. Being able to kill so many people in the enemy's base while being searched by more than 10,000 people. He was simply a super ferocious person. However, even if he was a super ferocious person, under such circumstances, it was only a matter of time before he was caught. They had to find him before he was caught. It has nothing to do with whether he is in danger or not. The important thing is to snatch him back. Otherwise, if the boss finds out, he will skin us alive, another burly man said. That's right, a few others echoed. So what if Rinpoche was in danger? If he wasn't in danger, wouldn't they save him? What they needed to do now was to snatch the lady boss back, not to see whether she was in danger or not. Now that you have entered, do you know where your lady boss is? Furthermore, there are so many of you. I'm afraid that before you can find her, you will be turned into sieves, another man said. Puffed. A few burly men sneered. When I killed people, you guys were still in your mother's womb. I have even charged through an army of 100,000, let alone these few people. This sneered made the veins on the other men's foreheads pop. At this moment, a huge flame suddenly lit up at the pier in the distance. A ball of fire soared into the sky. Then, there were continuous sounds of explosions. This sound attracted everyone's attention. Then, All the soldiers ran to the pier like crazy. The lady boss is there. A burly man suddenly stood up and laughed. Chapter 725. In the command center, an old man stood in front of the window and looked at the fire in the distance. His facial expression kept changing under the light. A hurried voice came from the walkie-talkie on the table. "Commander, it's the Goodman Richard. We're in trouble." Another person behind him looked in the same direction with a pale face. Putting aside the deaths of hundreds of soldiers, the strike group, composed of 3 aircraft carriers, was currently conducting exercises nearby. The flagship of the 7th Fleet, an amphibious assault ship with a draft of 40,000 tons, had actually been blown up. This incident would definitely cause a huge uproar. Furthermore, there was no way to explain it. Could it be that it was done by one person in the base? Not to mention whether it was possible to say it. Even if it was said, would anyone believe it? How would the outside world view the 7th Fleet? Look, that's the 7th Fleet that was turned upside down by one person. Tens of thousands of soldiers couldn't even catch one person, and their flagship was blown up. The consequences of this incident made his heart tremble. The biggest possibility was that 2 scapegoats would be pushed out. For such a big incident, the status of the scapegoat couldn't be low. Otherwise, the public's anger wouldn't be appeased. He wasn't in the mood to worry about the person in front of him now. Instead, he started to worry about himself. In the end, the person in front of him would have to take the blame and resign. But his own fate would probably be even worse. Some scum in the army were dissatisfied with being punished by their superiors, so they colluded with terrorists and blew up the ammunition depot of the Goodman Richard. They even blew up a warehouse, the old man said slowly. The other person was stunned for a moment before reacting. If the military colluded with the outside world, it would make sense if that was the case. "Who are those scum?" he asked tentatively. "Find a few yellow-skinned people among the dead," the old man said. "Understood." The person nodded immediately. Yellow-skinned people in the army usually didn't interact with other people, so it wasn't easy for them to get into trouble. Furthermore, the other party was yellow-skinned, so they might be able to push the blame to the big country. As for the rest, it didn't matter. As long as there was an explanation that could convince the people, it would be fine. It didn't matter how the families of those people would react. Ren Bachien paddled with one hand and held his clothes with the other as he quietly crept ashore in the dark. This position was already very far away from where they were before, more than 20 kilometers away. It was already very close to the location of the Japan Self-Defense Forces. If he wanted to rush to the place he suspected to be the headquarters, he would have to travel at least 20 kilometers. A normal person would definitely not be able to run 20 kilometers from here and still be able to fight. The other party did not expect him to run so far, so the security here was much looser than in other places. However, Rinpoche's speed was fast enough, and his physical strength was good enough. If he ran 20 kilometers at full speed, it would only take him 15 minutes. This meant that his range of activity was far beyond their imagination. Furthermore, they didn't have enough manpower to conduct a carpet search of the entire base. As a result, they were led by the nose by Run Bachien, who was hiding in the dark. Even though they had already treated him as a Superman, there were still many areas that they had overlooked. Now, they were all searching within a 10-kilometer radius of the previous ship, while he had avoided the main force and went straight for the vital point. 20 minutes later, when Rin Bachien was about to reach the target, he suddenly heard a burst of chaotic gunshots and screams. Rin Bachien was stunned. What was going on? Is there such a thing as blowing up a camp in the army? However, this could attract some attention. However, the next second, a rough voice almost made Rin Bachien, who was running at high speed, fall to the ground. "Ha, little bastards, Grandpa is here. F***CK. Rin Bachien was immediately confused. Why were the winged cavalry here? Which be asterisk starred let them come. Now that someone had come to rescue him, his first reaction wasn't joy, but curses. He was the only one who could fight and leave as he pleased. With the addition of this group of B** starts, he immediately became a bigger target. However, They should have been contacted by Yang Senator Yang's son, should have arranged for someone to receive them, right? Even if someone came to receive them, this was still the base of the 7th Fleet, and there were more than 10,000 soldiers with live ammunition going crazy there. Ren Bachien rushed to the front and directly barged in through a window. He ran into the corridor and happened to see more than a dozen soldiers holding guns and wildly spraying bullets in an empty area. A black soldier sensed something and turned his head to see a cold star getting bigger and bigger. Plop! More than a dozen corpses fell to the ground one after another. Someone popped his head out from the corner and was stunned when he saw Ren Bachien. Then, he revealed an ecstatic expression and leaned out from behind the corner. "Mr. Ren, you are—" Ren Bachien guessed that they were sent by Yang's senior lady boss. 5 or 6 burly men rushed out from the corner and grinned. "They said you were here, and we found you. Otherwise, Her Majesty would have skinned us. Mr. Ren, I was ordered to come and receive you." A tall soldier in ordinary camouflage clothes with a face that looked like it was carved out of stone stepped forward with a gun in his hand. "Well, why did you attack here?" Ren Bachien raised a question. "This is their headquarters. We wanted to capture 2 high-ranking officials and get them to release you. Otherwise, we won't be able to rescue Sir Ren in such a big base. It's good that it's their headquarters." Ren Bachien was relieved after getting the answer he wanted. "If I wanted to leave, I would have left long ago. Or rather, I let them capture me on purpose. Originally, it was convenient for me to stay and leave whenever I wanted, but with you guys around, I would be a bigger target. How did you arrange for the rescue?" "The rescue is outside. We have to rush out," the soldier immediately said. "You guys leave first. You can also attract some of their attention." "I will go up and take a look," Ren Bachien said. "We can't leave until Mr. Ren leaves. The order we received was to take Mr. Ren away," the soldier said solemnly. Ren Bachien's face darkened. "You guys aren't of any help to me now. Instead, you are a burden." He could tell that these soldiers were at the man-wheel level and should be the top fighting force in the country. Their reaction speed and speed were far beyond that of ordinary people. In addition, they used firearms as weapons and might be able to fight against dozens of people at the same time. The problem was that there were tens of thousands of people outside. Furthermore, they had heavy firearms. Ren Bachien's face darkened, but he was still somewhat imposing, making the soldier feel as if he was looking at a superior. However, the soldier still insisted, "We will leave with Mr. Ren. If we can't leave, we will stay behind to attract the enemy's firepower. Mr. Ren will take advantage of the chaos to leave." Ren Bachien was so angry that he almost laughed. However, the soldier's last sentence made him feel a little emotional. This was probably what a soldier was like. Looking at those cheeky idiots at the side, he wondered why there was such a big difference in their behavior. "Do you guys have a way to leave under the siege of more than 10,000 soldiers?" Ren Bachien asked. "No. However, since Mr. Ren has been able to cause trouble at this base for so long without being caught, you should be able to leave by yourself. Also, these few people are very powerful and should be able to leave as well. As for us, you don't have to worry about us," the soldier said word by word. Ren Bachien seemed to see some kind of radiance on his stone-like face. The determination of a soldier who was willing to sacrifice for his orders softened Ren Bachien's heart. "What's your name?" Ren Bachien asked. "Base 637, Captain Shi Guanglong." The soldier saluted. "What about you guys?" "Zhang Jiwa, Shueping, Wang Gang, Qinzhe." Ren Bachien felt that something was mixed in. "There are a total of 11 of us. Including them, there are a total of 23 people. There are also some people guarding outside, Mr. Ren." Ren Bachien looked up. So close, yet so far. He was already so close. As long as he had 10 more minutes, he would be able to capture the commander of this base and create a big piece of news. However, 10 more minutes would be enough for the enemy's reinforcements to surround this place tightly. "Let's go and rush out," Ren Bachien said as he looked at everyone. Although he was becoming more and more indifferent to life, he didn't want to see these people die here. In the end, he was inexplicably moved by those 2 sentences. Although he had already created a big firework, he still felt a little regretful that it ended like this. "Thank you." Sure, Guanglong saluted again. After meeting up with the group outside, he didn't have time to say anything else and directly rushed back the way he came. The journey could be considered smooth. After all, these soldiers were at the man-will level. With the winged cavalry leading the way, only a few of them were pierced through. The main reason was that when they were attacked, the soldiers would strategically find cover, and the winged cavalry would usually jump over with their sabers. If the situation was different, they might be able to restrain themselves. However, at this moment, these winged cavalry warriors looked at their comrades and felt their blood rush to their heads. Firearms? Weren't these things similar to Great Xia's crossbow battalion? They had already rushed past the crossbow battalion, and their numbers were much greater than the enemy's. In any case, he was going all out. Even if the bird didn't die, it wouldn't die for tens of thousands of years. Ren Bachien roamed in the dark, using the metal chain and his honed assassination skills to quickly resolve a lot of problems. Otherwise, these winged cavalry warriors would have been reduced in number. Chapter 726. After leaving Zhua Shibao's base, the evacuation route wasn't easy. The U.S. military reacted crazily, and helicopters circled the northern part of Nagasaki all night long. They didn't know what benefits they had promised, but the self-defense forces and police also set up checkpoints. Relying on Ren Bachien's extraordinary perception, they arrived at a previously prepared hiding spot. "Wait here first. It's still safe here, and they can't keep searching so wantonly. After these 2 days, I'll find an opportunity to send you guys away. I'll send some food over later. You guys can rest first," the person who brought them here said. Ren Bachien and the others didn't ask for the other party's identity. They could only listen to his arrangements in the current situation. He only said, "Send more food. It will be best if there's enough for 100 people." After all, everyone present was a big eater. The appetite of those soldiers probably wasn't small either. Ren Bachien and the others were in the basement of a building. Separated by a wall was the parking lot, and outside was the city. According to his plan, if they were really discovered, such an environment would be enough for them to cause a ruckus. Then, he would bring a few people back to Dayo. Then, he would bring the Empress and Lin Shaola back to avenge them. With the Empress and Lin Shaola around, no target could escape. After the other party left, everyone quieted down. This was a space of about 100 square meters, which could fit more than 20 people. Even though the ventilation system was good, it became stuffy with so many people crammed in. "Take a seat and wait." Ren Bachien looked for a corner. After a day, he was very tired. Previously at the base, it was as if he was on steroids. Now that he was in a different environment, he was overwhelmed with fatigue. There was also hunger. The last time he ate was when he found some compressed rations and canned food on that ship. Although it hadn't been much time since then, he was already very hungry, and his stomach was tossing and turning. Whether it was traveling at high speed or fighting, he consumed too much energy. Ren Bachien sat there to rest, and the others also sat down. The winged cavalry warriors took out first aid kits and bandaged the wounds of a few unlucky fellows. Their chests and stomachs had been shot a few times, but the bullets had already been squeezed out with the movement of their muscles. The bleeding had already stopped, and there wasn't much point in bandaging them. As for the soldiers, they glanced over from time to size him up. He looked to be in his 20s and was very strong. There was a strong smell of blood on his body. He was not very handsome, but he was in line with the aesthetic standards of the military. When he closed his eyes and kept a straight face, he looked very dignified. It was this person who persisted for an entire afternoon and night under the pursuit of tens of thousands of people. Not only did he kill a lot of people from the other side, but he also blew up one of the other side's warships. He could be said to be a peerless, ferocious man. People in the army admired those with strength. These people usually felt good about themselves. Even 100 ordinary people would not be a match for them. If it wasn't for the fact that the country didn't allow it, They could have broken most of the records if they participated in the Olympics. However, the things that the other party had done were still things that he couldn't do. He didn't even dare to imagine. Other than a peerless, ferocious person, he couldn't think of any other name that would be more appropriate. And that spear of his spear technique was much more brilliant than the spear experts he had seen in the army. He didn't know where such an expert came from. And those burly men, are they his subordinates? Each and every one of them was an expert that others could only look up to. According to the current classification of strength in the army, they were at least one level higher than him and the others, right? Could it be that the current training method had something to do with them? Otherwise, it was impossible for them to be so strong. Not long after, two burly men walked up to Rinpoche awkwardly and said, "Lady Boss, it's our fault. It's up to you to beat or kill us later." It was these two men's carelessness that resulted in Rinpoche being captured and losing all his face. Rinpoche rolled his eyes and said, "Get lost. Do you think I'm as stupid as you two? I deliberately pretended to be unconscious and was brought here by them to teach them a lesson so that they wouldn't keep thinking about me every day. In the end, you bunch of idiots came here to mess things up. Oh, you did it on purpose." The two men immediately relaxed after hearing this. Just as I said, with the lady boss's strength, how could she be captured? Rinpoche rolled his eyes. Both of them were tricked, and his strength was similar to theirs. Why couldn't he be captured? However, now wasn't the time to teach these two idiots a lesson. He waved his hands like he was swatting flies to chase them away. The dozens of soldiers looked at him with admiration. He was indeed a peerless, ferocious man. If they hadn't come, he might have been able to do it. As the Nye nation became more and more powerful, those bastards from the United States had been looking for trouble over the past few years. After being messed around by Rinpoche, everyone felt relieved. Afterward, everyone lowered their voices and rested. The winged cavalry warriors took off their clothes and slept soundly with their upper bodies bare. When someone woke up and spoke loudly, they immediately became well-behaved after being reprimanded by Rinpoche. Previously, Rinpoche's strength was low, and they were relatively bold. Now, even though Rinpoche's strength wasn't comparable to theirs, it wasn't too far off. In particular, along the way, Rinpoche's attacks were decisive, ruthless, and extremely fast. He was the type of opponent that they hated the most. As a result, they were much more well-behaved when facing Rinpoche. It wasn't until daybreak that the sound of cars stopping outside could be heard before the man brought in water and food. It wasn't for 100 people, but only for 50 people, and it was enough to fill a few boxes. Mr. Ren, Shi Guanglong asked someone to bring in food for 5 people. They also practiced martial arts and naturally understood that the stronger one was, the more food they would eat. Rinpoche and the winged cavalry warriors ate the most. They only kept one portion for each person and distributed the rest to Rinpoche and the rest. After waiting for 3 days in a row, the other party finally informed them that they could be sent off. A few hours later, Rinpoche finally set foot on China's soil. "You are finally back. I can finally rest assured," Yang Sun said as soon as he saw Rinpoche. He had been very anxious for the past few days. If anything happened to Rinpoche, the nation wouldn't be able to bear the loss. However, seeing that nothing happened to Rinpoche and thinking about the news that he had received, he was shocked. Was this a true expert? One person was able to stir up such a huge storm and come out unscathed. When would we be able to train such an expert ourselves? At that time, let's see which country would still dare to cause trouble for China. Although China had already surpassed the United States to become the world's largest economy, its international status was still inferior to the United States, especially in terms of military strength. Otherwise, how would the other party dare to conduct military exercises in the South repeatedly? If they could train a group of such experts themselves, the future would be really exciting. There's nothing to worry about. This isn't a problem for me. Originally, I was going to teach them a lesson, but I didn't expect you to send so many people. It's inconvenient to make a big target, Rinpoche said calmly. You have already taught them a lesson. This time, they hate you to the core. Yang Sen smiled and gave him a thumbs up. The good guy Richard, the flagship of the 7th Fleet, was actually blown up by you. Even I was shocked. If they were 10 minutes later, you would still be seeing the head of the commander of the 7th Fleet. Ren Bachien said regretfully. Huh. Yang Sun laughed dryly. If that was the case, the United States would definitely shed all pretense of cordiality. A 4-star general was killed in the base, and the United States definitely wouldn't tolerate this. It was good that things had turned out this way. Not only did he teach them a lesson, but he could also force them to swallow their anger. Mr. Run, I'm afraid you won't be able to go abroad in the future, and it's best for you to live in seclusion during this period of time, Yang Sun said as he thought of something. I can understand if you can't go abroad. Why do you live in seclusion? Can they still affect the country? Rinpochen asked. The United States has issued an arrest warrant. They claim that some soldiers in the army were reprimanded by their superiors and held a grudge for other reasons. As a result, they were bribed by Mr. Ren. While some of them were creating disturbances, others blew up a warehouse and the ammunition compartment of the good guy Richard, causing the warship to explode in the harbor. They really dare to say that. Ren Bachien was speechless. Sure enough, they definitely didn't dare to say that he was the one who turned them upside down. Furthermore, the list of those who colluded with Mr. Ren that they released were the soldiers who died when Mr. Ren caused havoc in the base. There were a total of 14 of them, and they were all Chinese. They risked their lives for them, and now they have to bear the stigma. Yang Sun sighed slightly. Although they were the enemy, they were also Chinese. These people actually didn't make any mistakes, but they suffered such a thing. Just thinking about it made people feel regretful. When Rinpochen killed them, he didn't care whether they were Chinese or not. In any case, they were all enemies and he had to kill them. Now that he heard this news, he felt a little angry. It was a feeling of righteous indignation. He thought about how he was a firm believer in the past. After saying this news, Yang Sun changed to a relaxed tone and said, now that the other party has issued an arrest warrant, Mr. Ren, you won't be disturbed in the country, and the country also monitors foreign news. However, there are always some things that can't be monitored, and Mr. Ren's identity can easily be exposed. If Mr. Ren wants to have plastic surgery, as long as you make some slight adjustments, I think you could be unrecognizable. Our techniques are very good. Can I look like Wu Yinzu? Ren Bachien asked. I have to ask an expert about this, but there shouldn't be a problem. Yang Sun laughed. In that case, help me ask. Ren Bachien laughed. Of course, this was pure nonsense. If he were to look like Wu Yinzu, the Empress would probably beat him up until he looked like Guo Di Gang. The Empress wouldn't be able to accept him suddenly changing his appearance. Also, the elder that you video chatted with previously wants to meet you. Yang Sun only brought up the matter at hand after laughing. All right, the time will be half a month from now. Ren Bachien nodded. Although he didn't know the reason why that elder wanted to meet him, it was probably related to this matter. It was necessary for Ren Bachien to meet him. At this time, Ren Bachien still didn't know that the impact of this matter was actually greater than what Yang Sun had said. After all, the flagship of the 7th Fleet had been blown up, and thousands of soldiers had been sacrificed in their own base. This matter couldn't be suppressed no matter how hard they tried. Tens of thousands of people protested in various cities in the United States, and the Congress held several successive meetings. Even the president, who was doing things his own way, was severely questioned. The whole world was paying attention to this matter. Countless countries were investigating the details of this matter. Even though the people at the base had already issued a gag order, with the efforts of various countries, the layer of mystery was gradually revealed. Chapter 727. In a certain empire where the sun never sets. Did he do it alone? Are you sure about this report? A man looked at the report about the 7th Fleet's riot and asked. Yes, from the information we received, it's true. Although I'm also very skeptical. There's only one truth after eliminating all the impossibilities. The middle-aged man in front of him said seriously as he pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Put this report here first and continue to investigate. I want to know the specific situation of this person. A certain fighting nation. Although I'm very happy that our archenemy is in a terrible fix, I want to know more about this matter than this report that seems more like an alien invasion of Earth. The maverick president of the United States could be said to be in a terrible fix for the past 2 days. The Congress needed him to give an explanation, and the people behind him were also urging him to do so. The temptation of this biochemical technology was too great. However, after this failure, China would definitely be more vigilant than before. It would be very difficult to take action again. When Ren Baqian bade farewell to Yang's son, he specially looked for Shi Guanglong and the others. If you have nowhere to go after retiring, you can look for me. I have martial arts that will allow you to advance further, Ren Baqian said to them. If there is such a day. Shi Guanglong and the others didn't seem to take it to heart. They knew very well that they would probably never leave the army in this lifetime. However, Ren Baqian's last sentence confirmed Shi Guanglong and the rest's judgment. Those martial arts were indeed related to him. Yang Sen's expression changed slightly behind Ren Baqian. He didn't expect Ren Baqian to take a fancy to these people. He had to consider whether to send these people to Ren Baqian's side. It might be a good opportunity. However, he was a little reluctant to do so. Although these people weren't the most talented, they were still the cream of the crop. They were the seeds selected from the millions of soldiers. This matter couldn't be rushed. It was better to think about it carefully. Although he was confident in the loyalty of these people, since they dared to say it publicly, he didn't know what methods they had. If they didn't return in the end, the loss wouldn't be small. After speaking to them, Ren Baqian bid farewell to Yang's son, returned to the villa, and had a big meal before preparing to return to Dayo. Just as he was about to leave in the Empress's carriage, a crimson shadow suddenly pierced into his arms like lightning. As the surrounding environment changed, the crimson shadow turned into a stream of light and rushed into the distance. During this time, a red figure suddenly tried to stop him, but he still missed. The Empress landed resentfully from the sky. That little thing was too fast. First, she looked at Ren Baqian with an unfriendly expression. This was the guy who had stolen her imperial carriage. However, after seeing Ren Baqian's appearance, she let out a soft cry of surprise. What happened to you? The Empress immediately noticed the changes in his body. The thick smell of blood and the biting, cold, murderous aura on his body could not be concealed. This was a smell that Ren Baqian didn't have before. The Empress immediately knew that Ren Baqian was in trouble. The stench of blood on his body was so strong that it was not from killing 1 or 2 people. At least 100 people. I was targeted and careless. Ren Baqian smiled casually. He sat in the Empress's carriage and lazily asked, "Is there anything to eat? I've been starving these days." Even though he had eaten for half a day on Earth before returning, he felt that only the food in this world could truly fill him up. In the past, he always felt that not being full was a kind of happiness. He could continue to eat and eat all kinds of delicacies. Now, he realized that it was actually not as good as he thought. Even when he was eating, hunger always haunted him. If there was anything in this world that made people suffer the most, it would probably be hunger. The Empress first asked someone to prepare food for Ren Baqian, following which, she asked Hong Wan to bring out some wine and asked the surrounding people to stay away. Then, she sat opposite Ren Baqian, bent her legs, and said, "Tell me about it." Ren Baqian smiled and told the Empress about what happened. He emphasized on his bravery, how he went in and out of the tens of thousands of armed soldiers and killed the enemies until they trembled with fear. When he was done, he stretched out his hand and a spear appeared in his palm. This golden spear and the metal chain really contributed a lot. This time, I have gained a lot from this golden spear. This can be considered a blessing in disguise, the Empress said faintly. Following which, she frowned and faintly sighed. Even though I also hope that you can make some progress, it's better to avoid such things. Looking at your current appearance, even though you look sharp, I feel a little heartache. Being in the midst of the enemy, a little carelessness will lead to infinite danger. Previously, you were the one who showed me the video of the atomic bomb. This time, They didn't know your strength and didn't prepare well. Next time, you might not be so lucky. Even without the atomic bomb, as long as you are more prepared, it will be difficult for you to escape unscathed this time. Rinpoche nodded. What the Empress said was the truth. He was also clear in his heart. No matter what, he was just a single person. If the other party wanted to take him down, as long as they dragged on for 2 days, he would be in danger. I have caused your majesty to worry about me. The Empress looked at him with flickering eyes and continued. Previously, I thought that your nation could protect you. Now, it seems that it isn't as easy as I thought. Your world is different from this one. It is impossible for the nation to go into seclusion and prohibit people from coming and going. No matter how strict the checks are, there will always be loopholes. Previously, it was still fine because there were people who helped you cover up. But now that you have exposed the things that you have, I am afraid that many countries will target you. After all, the things that you have are too valuable to them. If it were me, I would also be tempted. No matter how strict the security of your nation is, it is only in private and cannot prevent so many people from eyeing you. Also, I'm not always by your side. I am afraid that there will be more problems in the future. I was rash. I only thought that the things that I have grasped will be valued by the nation. Now that such a thing has happened, I am afraid that I will be looked down upon by others, and there will be more troubles in the future. Rinpoche understood. Previously, with the nation covering up, only one country had their eyes on him. But after this incident, he was afraid that it would no longer be covered up. In the future, the ones who would be watching him wouldn't just be the United States. The Empress drank another cup of wine, slowly deliberated, and said, Your concerns are not wrong. You will indeed be looked down upon by others, but it won't be appropriate if you do nothing. Even though I don't know much about your nation, I can tell from those television dramas that internal strife happens from time to time. It is very different from Dayo. If you're looked down upon by others, there will be many people who have designs on you in the future. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche let go of his worries and laughed carefreely. In that case, I can't hide no matter what. Therefore, what you did this time isn't necessarily wrong. At least for the time being, there's a place that can shelter you from the wind and rain. In some aspects, the interests of you and your nation are aligned. Unfortunately, your nation is willing but unable to deal with the troubles in the future. Unless you hide, no matter what they do, they can only shield you from most of the troubles. I am afraid that you still have to rely on yourself for those that are truly well prepared. I have learned a saying from television dramas. You can be a thief for 1,000 days, but you can't guard against thieves for 1,000 days. No matter how much you guard against them, it is impossible to guard against them all. This is also unavoidable. Fortunately, I still have some ability to protect myself. Rinpoche laughed. He was definitely not willing to hide it. The Empress paused for a moment, looked at Rinpoche for a long time, and then said, There are some things that I have wanted to say for a long time. It is just that you have grown up over there and have feelings in your heart. I also don't want to make you unhappy. Please speak, Your Majesty. Rinpoche sat upright. It was rare for the Empress to say these things to him. The Empress first poured herself a cup of wine, drank it in one gulp, poured another cup, and then pushed the wine pot to Rinpoche. After both of them raised their cups and drank together, the Empress said, Chapter 728. The Empress had never spent so much effort on a single person in her entire life. No one would believe that the Empress of Dayo, the 5th most powerful expert in the world, not many people knew that Tengyu was dead, would actually spend so much effort on a man. She even kept some words in her heart and didn't say them until now. She was just like the children in the marketplace. The time in Dayo is different from the time on Earth, the Empress said. Rinpoche laughed and said, Your Majesty, you found out. 1 day in Dayo is 3 days on Earth. Although the passage of time feels the same, the time in the two worlds is different. The Empress raised her eyes and rebuked. Do you think I'm a fool? How could I not know? It's just that I don't know what the time in the two worlds is like. Just like what the Journey to the West said, One day in heaven is equivalent to 1 year on earth. Who knows? That's why I didn't tell you. How can that be? Your Majesty is wise and resourceful. Whoever treats you as a fool is the fool. Rinpoche laughed when he saw the Empress's expression. The Empress looked at Rinpoche and said faintly, "It's indeed different. Although you used to laugh, you didn't have such vigor. Do you think it's good or bad, Your Majesty?" Rinpoche asked with a smile. "As I said, it looks good. It's just that the things behind it make my heart ache." The Empress sighed again. "To be able to make Your Majesty feel sorry for me, I feel very carefree. This is the most carefree thing in my life. Who else in the world can be like me?" Rinpoche laughed again. The Empress said faintly, "You are the best at saying nice things." She stopped Rinpoche from speaking and said, "I sighed more today than I did in the past 20 years. Let's continue from before. 1 day in Dayo is 3 days on Earth. Do you know how long your lifespan is? You are at least 100 years old now. If you become a spirit wheel expert, you will be 150 years old, which is 450 years on Earth." "It's 300 years, Rinpoche corrected. "I also have to spend some time on Earth. If my lifespan is 150 years, half of my time in Dayo and half of my time on Earth will be 75 years in Dayo. In fact, now that I have more autonomy, I can spend more time in Dayo and reduce the passage of time for myself. Perhaps I can stay in Dayo for 100 years, which is equivalent to 300 years on Earth. I won't let you die so much earlier than I do. I'll think of something when the time comes. The jade embryo that the General-in-Chief who supports the nation presented to me was obtained from the 60,000 mountains. It can extend your life by at least 20 years. Furthermore, your path doesn't stop at the spirit wheel level. Your martial arts are special. Even though it's somewhat dangerous to cultivate, it'll be a smooth journey once you get through it. Even though it will cost a lot of treasures, there are many treasures in the 60,000 mountains. No matter how much I have to pay, I will push you to the land of the creation of heaven and earth. That will give you at least 220 years of life. After that, I will think of other ways." Then, he said angrily, "Don't interrupt me all the time. You're interrupting what I want to say." The rulers of the countries on earth were not inherited from father to son. They would change every 8 to 10 years. Although their influence could be extended, it would eventually decline, especially after a few decades and a few generations of rulers. As their strength increased, some things would be forgotten, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The agreement with you would no longer be valid. In my opinion, you would have to part ways sooner or later. You knew this clearly, so you made arrangements. However, in my opinion, it was still too petty. Or rather, you were considerate, so everything was passive. You gave the initiative to them and gave them the opportunity to have other ideas. Martial arts are nothing in this world, but they're extremely precious in your world. If I were to do it, I would announce everything to the public. If your countries want it, you have to satisfy me. If someone doesn't do as I say and dares to have other ideas, I will naturally let him know what regret is. If I want to kill someone, no one can stop me. After that, I will exclude this country. There will be threats and temptations, and no one will dare to have other ideas. There are so many countries, and it's impossible for them to be united. When the time comes, there will naturally be people who will draw closer. In fact, it's fine as long as these things are announced. When some countries get what they want, the others will set their sights on those countries. It doesn't matter whether it's an exchange of benefits or something else. The main thing is that once these things are announced, no one will take the risk to find trouble with you. It won't be like now, where as long as one country gets it, the other countries will have to get it. Otherwise, they will fall behind, and no one will be able to accept this. In the end, you will become a target yourself. Your Majesty, you are right. I was born and raised here, and there are some things I can't do because of our ties. Rinpoche smiled bitterly. That's why I said that you were considerate and put yourself in this situation. Things will become like this sooner or later, and it's just a matter of time. Even if it's not this time, it will be the next time or the time after that. There's another reason why I said that you are petty. Since it will be like this sooner or later, your arrangements are too weak. What can a dozen winged cavalry warriors do? Even as a deterrent, it's far from enough. It's just a small fight. If you mention it to me, I will give you 1,000 Kismet Heaven experts and divide them into several groups to bring back. Even if it takes a long time, it will only take about 100 groups of 7 people each time. It won't even take a year. With these 1,000 Kismet Heaven experts, you can find people to train according to the army of your world. With such a group of people, even if they are only used for self-defense, who will dare to act rashly? With this strength, you can attack and retreat at will. At this time, your country is asking for your help. If you bring 1,000 Kismet Heaven experts back, they won't be able to do anything. At most, they will make an agreement with you. At that time, if they really have other thoughts, they will have to think twice. If anyone dares to act rashly, my brave warriors will let them know how to write the word aboriginals. At this moment, the Empress's face was radiant, and she was in high spirits. Her entire body was filled with confidence and dominance. Rinpoche imagined the scene of the heads of the various countries being pressed by the aboriginals and forced to write the word aboriginals. That scene was really beautiful. Then he smiled bitterly. The Empress was right. He was still too worried. The Empress seemed to see through his thoughts and continued, "It doesn't matter if you have concerns about this matter. You have to know that these arrangements are only for deterrence and self-defense. If others don't make a move, everything will be fine and everyone will mind their own business. If others raise their sabers, will you still be able to shrink your neck? These arrangements are the sabers to counterattack. However, there are currently less than 700 winged cavalry warriors." Rinpoche kept smiling bitterly. "It's just that we couldn't afford to support too many of these winged cavalry warriors previously. The imperial court isn't wealthy and has to support 90,000 soldiers. How can we support too many Kismet Heaven experts? When we arrive at the 60,000 mountains, I will let you see how the aboriginal men can fight with those beasts in the mountains. What you see is more than what you see. At present, the soldiers in the army are recruited from the periphery of the 60,000 mountains. Their living environment isn't that bad, and their strength is relatively low. The brave warriors in the depths of the 60,000 mountains are the true elites of the aboriginals. They are fierce and powerful. It's not impossible that we don't have people who are as powerful as the officials in the imperial court. When the late emperor led the army to sweep the Han nation, many of the fierce warriors in the depths of the mountains joined the army. If you want, not to mention 1,000, even if it's 2,000 or 3,000, I can also provide you." "Let me think about it carefully," Rinpoche said. "It would be easy to bring back 20 people as bodyguards, and the nation wouldn't care too much. If he brought back 1,000 fiercer aboriginal elites, many people would be worried." However, this was also the Empress's goal. These words made him feel that even though the Empress liked to use her hands more than her brain, she was, after all, the Empress of Dayo and could see the overall situation far better than ordinary people. Even though she didn't know much about Earth, she was very clear about this matter and couldn't refute her words. Rinpoche suppressed this thought, looked at the Empress, and said, "Your Majesty's charm is really captivating, and I can't wait for the wedding." The Empress retracted her spirited expression and leaned back against the wall of the imperial carriage. She looked slightly unnatural and asked, "Great Attendant said that you want me to marry you?" Rinpoche let go of his thoughts and laughed. "Your betrothal is too fierce, and I can't beat them. They will either drug or poison me, and it won't look good for anyone who gets poisoned. Why don't your Majesty marry me? I definitely won't resist. Women in our world need dowry when they get married. What's your dowry?" The Empress looked slightly shy, and the domineering look she had when she spoke just now was completely gone. She looked like a little girl. Rinpoche slowly said, "I'll grant you the kind of world you want, a world full of flowers and brocade." The Empress softly repeated it a few times, and her expression changed. She felt that this sentence from Rinpoche was enough for her to put in so much effort. It wasn't for this world, but for herself. Chapter 729. Rinpoche leaped from the branch and landed on another tree in less than a second. He didn't make much noise during this process. As soon as he steadied himself, he opened his arms wide and leaned backward. Then he descended head first. In midair, a long spear appeared in his hand, and he thrust it at the huge leopard with a single horn. The leopard, which had been searching for Rinpoche and seemed to have lost track of him, revealed a cunning and cruel look. It suddenly turned around and climbed up the tree trunk for 5 or 6 meters before leaping into the air and pouncing toward Rinpoche, who was free-falling in midair. Slap! The leopard's front claws hit Rinpoche's spear, and its bloody mouth, which was full of sharp teeth, bit at Rinpoche's throat. If Rinpoche couldn't dodge in time, this bite would have bitten off his head. The stench from the leopard's mouth assaulted Rinpoche's nose, and he subconsciously wanted to cover his nose. At this moment, a metal chain suddenly emerged from the top of Rinpoche's head and struck the leopard's eye. The chain was too sudden, and the leopard's eye exploded. The leopard howled miserably, twisted its body, and fell to the ground. Its body emitted a ferocious aura as it stared at Rinpoche with a cruel and resentful gaze. An injured beast was even more dangerous. Rinpoche loosened his grip on the spear and lowered his body. Wild beasts were much more difficult to deal with than humans. The beast in front of him was called a luong. It wasn't easy to deal with as it was very vigilant and strong. Its only valuable thing was the horn on its head, which could be blown dozens of kilometers away. Rinpoche had seen the horn of a 100-year-old luong before. The one in front of him was only about 60 years old, but it was already very difficult to deal with. He didn't know what a 100-year-old luong would be like. OM! The giant leopard roared and slowly retreated. Rinpoche was initially on high alert, but couldn't help but laugh when he saw what it did next. This was probably equivalent to a human saying, "Just you wait." After the luong retreated into the darkness, Rinpoche held the spear upside down behind him, stood there for a few minutes, and then turned to leave. However, before he could walk more than 10 meters away, he heard the sound of grass rubbing against wood. A huge leopard pounced out of the darkness with its mouth wide open, and a gust of fishy wind blew at him. What a cunning thing! What a vengeful thing! Rinpoche cursed softly and turned to the side of Luoyang. His spear suddenly appeared in his hand, and he thrust it out first. After missing, he used a flick and drew a bloody wound on the side of Luoyang's body. At the same time, the Luoyang's tail suddenly whizzed toward Rinpoche like a whip. Rinpoche threw out a chain, which collided with the Luoyang's tail and entangled it tightly. This time, the luong was really unlucky. His tail seemed to have been tied with a rope, and the rope was being held by someone else. Just as the luong landed and turned around, Rinpoche leaped into the air and used the momentum of its turn to leap behind it. He stabbed his spear down from midair, and the luong dodged, but another wound appeared on its body, following which it pounced forward, trying to distance itself from Rinpoche. It was a pity that Rinpoche was still dragging the metal chain. How could it speed up while dragging such a burden? On the contrary, its tail hurt from being dragged, but it was still a beast after all, and it ran even faster. Rinpoche exerted a little strength in his legs and was dragged along like a kite. Seeing that the luong was about to pounce into the bushes, the spear in his hand shot out like lightning and directly stabbed into its back. Buzz! A miserable howl pierced through the sky. Rinpoche disdainfully pulled out the golden spear and cut off the luong's horn. Then, he pinched his nose and lifted the golden spear far away to find a water source to wash it. Along the way, Rinpoche often went into the forest to hunt. The assassination skills that he had previously trained at the base had improved significantly. His marksmanship had improved as well, and his control over his body had also improved. If he continued like this, with the Empress's support, Rinpoche might really be able to embark on the path of an expert. After a few days, his assassination talent had reached level 2. It was level 1 on Earth, and it had increased by another level after returning. Rinpoche felt that if he continued like this, he might be able to obtain a title like the King of Eternal Darkness. After all, he didn't like to fight and kill like this. Now that he had the ability to protect himself, it was more or less enough. After washing the spear, he let the golden spear return to his sea of knowledge. Rinpoche carried the Luoyang horn and ran out of the forest. The other winged cavalry warriors had already brought their prey back. The light from a fire in the campsite illuminated far away, and Rinpoche could already smell the aroma of roasted meat before he even got close. After the Imperial Kitchen's chef obtained the seasonings, he continuously experimented and found that the roasted meat tasted much better than Rinpoche's. However, when Rinpoche had nothing to do, he would still roast it himself and share it with the Empress. It had nothing to do with whether it tasted good or not. Just like in the age of the internet, a personally written letter always gave people a special feeling. Rinpoche threw the Luoyang horn into the carriage, turned around, and walked to the Empress's side. Feeling bored? The Empress asked casually when she saw his expression. Yeah, it's been fresh for a few days, and the heat has passed. I won't do this again if I have nothing to do. Rinpoche laughed. The Empress pushed a plate of roasted meat to Rinpoche, combed her hair, and said, "It's good to do it again. In any case, there are people looking after you, and nothing will happen. You can also train. Only through constant battles will you improve quickly. With your Majesty around, why would I improve so quickly?" Rinpoche licked his face. It was obvious that he was shameless. In any case, he had never asked for it. His fiancée was so powerful. Why would he train so hard? You. The Empress stretched out her finger and pointed at him helplessly. These 2 days, when she saw Rinpoche hunting in the forest when he was resting, she thought that he had changed. The Empress was rather gratified by this. In the end, he returned to his original self in just a few days. When you go back in a while, I will follow you to take a look. The Empress did not mention the matter just now and changed the topic. Previously, she heard from Rinpoche that he was going to meet an old man who was also one of the rulers of that country. 2 days ago, Your Majesty said that you weren't interested, Rinpoche said with a smile. She changed her mind. You just got into trouble, and now someone wants to meet you. I'm afraid there's something going on. Furthermore, you were born and raised there, and you still have feelings in your heart. As such, you can't be open-minded when doing things. If you're pressured by people using righteousness and the like, you will easily suffer losses if you don't think things through. I will follow them there and listen to what they have to say. If what they say isn't to my liking, I will fall out with them. If someone provokes me, I will kill them. As for the matter regarding the 1,000 warriors, you may have misgivings, but I don't. When the time comes, I will tell them openly that I have already made my decision, and it's useless for them to object. Rinpoche was silent for a while. The Empress's words were very overbearing, but to put it bluntly, she was afraid that he would encounter danger there again. Following which, he laughed again and asked, Your Majesty, are you going to play the role of the bad guy? Blackface and redface are the terms on Earth. If there's nothing going on, I will play the bad guy. If there's something going on, I will let them experience it, the Empress said faintly. Experience what kind of character the fourth most powerful expert in the world, Qi Zixiao, was. Don't feel that this is inappropriate. It's better to leave a deep impression on them now and let them have misgivings. It's better than one day falling out with them, the Empress said again. Rinpoche laughed and said, Are we considered husband and wife now? One plays the bad guy, and the other plays the good guy. This is rather safe. Your Majesty is right. It's better to clarify the situation now than to fall out with them in the future. It's good that you can understand. I was afraid that you would feel uncomfortable, so I didn't intervene. This time, you have encountered such danger, and I'm afraid that you will encounter it again in the future. I can't just let it go. Seeing that Rinpoche was laughing, the Empress laughed as well. Her eyes wandered, and her voice became gentler. 1,000 Kismet heaven experts. Rinpoche sighed. 1,000 Kismet heaven experts could even defeat a 100,000-strong army in one blow. If necessary, I can have more, the Empress said faintly. The only problem is the food. Fortunately, even though the food on your side doesn't convert much blood and chi, there's a lot of it. There's plenty of food for them to eat to their heart's content. If it weren't for their gluttony, the winged cavalry wouldn't only have 1,500 people. Reading a book from a friend, the host's head hurts. Chapter 730. Your Majesty. Rinpoche reached out and held the Empress's hand. Then, he held Lin Shaola's collar, who was snoring and drooling. An idea popped into Rinpoche's mind. It would be interesting if Lin Shaola was left naked in Dayo when the clothes arrived. It was just a thought. He knew that Lin Shaola would definitely be taken away if she wasn't overweight. Unless she was 50 kilograms heavier than him, and he didn't touch her, such a situation would only occur. The air around them began to distort. At this moment, a red line suddenly appeared and crashed into Rinpoche's chest. When the surroundings changed, they were back in the courtyard of the villa, where the carriage was previously placed. The temperature had also changed from extremely hot to cold. The cold air made Rinpoche feel comfortable from head to toe. Rinpoche used to hate the winter in the northeast. It was very cold, but Dayo was extremely hot all year round. This made him miss this cold feeling. Lin Shaola was still snoring in Rinpoche's arms. She even wiped her drool. The Empress, on the other hand, had a faint smile on her face as she stretched out her arm and carried a small red object. It was about the size of a teddy bear and slightly smaller than an ordinary fox. It had a pair of wings, a red back, and a white abdomen. Its small head was baring its teeth at the Empress, making a fierce look. This fellow, I've finally seen someone walk right into the trap. Rinpoche was surprised to see the little thing in the Empress's hands. This thing seems to be very interested in you. The Empress sized up the little thing with great interest. The Beachy was a very rare beast in legends. It could be said to be a symbol of misfortune. Its speed determined that most people could only see its back occasionally. Unless it was willing, it would be difficult for others to touch it. Even the Empress couldn't catch up with its speed. However, no one expected it to walk right into the trap at this time. Whether I'm in Dayo or on Earth, I don't know where this thing is hiding. It will only appear when I travel. I reckon that something attracted it at that moment, Rinpoche said after pondering for a while. That should be the case. The Empress nodded. After so many times, did your Majesty find anything? Rinpoche asked curiously. The Empress shook her head and replied, no. The only thing I could sense was that there was a change in the air before we traveled, as if something had been opened. What is it? A passage between two worlds. Rinpoche nodded. He didn't know if this passage was what attracted the Beachy. Perhaps there was something else, but he hadn't discovered it yet. Unfortunately, it couldn't speak. Rinpoche went forward and scratched its exposed belly. The Beachy immediately struggled with all its might and kicked its claws randomly, causing several scratches on Rinpoche's hand. Behave yourself. Is this male or female? Rinpoche took the risk of getting more than a dozen bloody scratches on his hands, pulled open its legs, and looked around curiously. The Beachy immediately exploded and kept barking at him. Woof, 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 woof. If it wasn't for the fact that it was being held tightly by the Empress, it would have fought to the death with Rinpoche. Should I prepare a cage for it? Rinpoche thought about putting this thing in a cage and sending it to the capital of Great Xia. He reckoned that there wouldn't be many people in Great Xia after a few years. The Empress liked the big round eyes of the Beachy, and her face was full of love. Forget it, it's just a small thing. It doesn't matter if it's a blessing or a misfortune. It looks quite pitiful, and it's not good to bully it. The Empress stretched out her other hand and touched its head before letting go. The Beachy immediately turned into a red shadow, pounced on Rinpoche's face, and scratched his face. Ouch! Just as Rinpoche cried out, the little thing disappeared. You have offended it badly. The Empress pursed her lips and laughed. Rinpoche looked aggrieved and said, Your Majesty, don't laugh, I'm disfigured. I just need to apply some ointment, the Empress said casually. This little thing is actually quite smart. The bloody scratches on your face look scary, but it's actually not a big deal. This little thing has barbs on its claws, and if it wants to, it can tear off a piece of flesh. Rinpoche sighed. This was an undeserved calamity. Wasn't it just to see if it was male or female? No matter how smart this thing was, it was still a beast. Did it have any moral values? Forget it. He didn't want to think about it anymore. Rinpoche turned his head and saw a row of winged cavalry warriors standing there obediently. Greetings, boss. Greetings, lady boss. 10 lashes for each of you to remember. Remember to bring a whip next time, the Empress said faintly. Yes. Everyone immediately responded without any hesitation. Wake up, we're at our stop. Rinpoche threw Lin Xiao on the ground and gently kicked her, but, oh. Lin Xiao rubbed her eyes and got up from the ground. This is that? What's this place called again? Lin Xiao looked at the courtyard and the villa in front of her and realized that she was no longer in Dayo. Let's go in and change. Rinpoche slapped the back of her head and threw her a piece of white rabbit creamy candy. This fully demonstrated what it meant to be slapped and given a piece of candy. The winged cavalry warriors heaved a sigh of relief after they entered the villa to change. This punishment seemed heavy, but it was actually very light. It was already good enough that the Empress didn't skin them alive. The Empress minded her own business and returned to her room. Rinpoche's job was to change Lin Xiao's clothes. It sounded like a benefit, but Rinpoche wasn't interested in her flat figure. He would have seen it many times if he wanted to. She usually wore a tube top and shorts when she slept. Her sleeping posture wasn't good, and there wasn't much to show. Rinpoche felt that he might as well look at himself instead of her. At least his chest muscles were bigger. He took out a t-shirt and threw it to her. We're the same as last time. Previously, when the Empress was besieged in Tianjin Basin, Rinpoche brought Lin Xiao, Qin Yuan, and Hong Wan here once, so they knew how to wear their clothes. Oh, Lin Xiao grunted and took off her clothes. She was still wearing a tube top and a pair of shorts inside. She then put the t-shirt over her body like a robe. The hem of the t-shirt reached her knees, and half of her shoulders were exposed. Lin Xiao was very skinny, and her appearance was different from the wildness of the Aboriginals. Instead, she was delicate and pretty like a little white flower. Now that she was wearing a robe, she looked like a little girl next door with a pure and soft aura. After returning her clothes, her eyelids started to struggle. She fell onto the bed and moaned comfortably on the soft mattress. Rinpoche turned his head to take a look after changing his clothes. The Empress wanted her to be his bodyguard when he returned to Earth in the future. No matter who saw her youthful and soft appearance, they wouldn't think that she was dangerous. In fact, she didn't hold back when she killed people and didn't feel guilty at all. It was as if she was drinking water, or more vividly like a wild beast hunting. Rinpoche gave Yongsen a call to confirm the itinerary. When he went downstairs, he saw the Empress in a red dress sitting on the sofa eating ice cream. It's 9 o'clock in the morning now. We will set off in an hour and arrive at the destination in the evening, Rinpoche said as he sat beside the Empress. Oh, this is the last one left. The Empress pointed to the wrapper of the Chala ice cream on the table. This was much more important than what Rinpoche said. An hour later, 3 cars stopped in front of Rinpoche's villa. Your Majesty, let's go. Rinpoche stood up and pulled the Empress to the second floor to bring Lin Xiao down. He didn't know what was waiting for him on this trip to the north. Rinpoche was more or less looking forward to it. Recommend my friend's master chef. Chapter 731. It's snowing. Rinpoche walked out of the station and stretched out his palms to welcome the falling snowflakes. Towards snow, his feelings were still quite deep. It snows 5 months a year in the Northeast. Many of his childhood memories were related to snow. That included the 2 brothers making a snowman. In the end, he made a pile of snow and stuffed Rinwanyan into it. That was how a freshly baked snowman was made. However, in recent years, they had rarely seen snow. They had only seen it once during the Chinese New Year 2 years ago. They hadn't even seen it last year. What is this? Lin Xiaola finally woke up after sleeping all the way. She looked at the falling snowflakes curiously. However, the others looked at her curiously. She was still wearing the t-shirt that Rinpoche had casually thrown at her. Everything below his knees was exposed, and he only had a half-sleeve shirt on his upper body. No matter how one looked at him, he did not look like a normal person in this season. What is this? It's like the ice in the palace. Lin Xiaola patted the snowflakes on her face with a satisfied expression. Miss Lin is really naive and romantic, Yang Sun said with a laugh by the side. Rinpoche looked at her, nodded, and said, "You can say that." Both he and the Empress were wearing overcoats that Yang Sun had brought over. Lin Xiaola also had one, but she didn't really like it. Rinpoche threw a white rabbit creamy candy over, waved his hand, and said, "Let's go." There were 3 cars with special license plates waiting outside. There were 2 cars at the front and back, and there were capable men standing in front of each car. Rinpoche, the Empress, and the Empress boarded the car in the middle. On the way, the sky darkened. Their destination was a courtyard in the imperial capital. There was a big iron gate outside, and inside was a small 2-story building. The first floor was lit up. A young man brought the 3 of them to the door and pressed the doorbell. The one who opened the door was an old man with jet black hair. He smiled and said, "Welcome. My identity is inconvenient, so I can't personally pick you up. Did you neglect me along the way?" "Boss, you are too serious," Rinpoche immediately replied. "Boss? Huh?" The old man immediately laughed and extended his hand to Rinpoche. "It's been a few years, and I finally get to see you in person." It wouldn't be appropriate to say that he was being courteous, but he was indeed very gentle and treated Rinpoche as an equal. His opponent's hand was steady and strong. This surprised Rinpoche. After all, given his age, it was indeed surprising that his palms were so strong. "Boss, have you practiced the 9th set of Qi?" Rinpoche immediately understood. That's right, the name of this basic technique that was suitable for ordinary people to cultivate was the 9th body, nourishing Qigong. This is the 11th set. First meet, then chat. "Miss Qi, may I know what the etiquette is in your country?" "Etiquette doesn't matter. I don't care about that," the Empress said casually. Lady Qi also holds a high position in the blessed and heavenly enclave. She is truly a woman who is not inferior to men. The old man laughed and said, "You're wrong. Only ordinary people say that women are not inferior to men. People like Miss Qi naturally can't say that." Even though the Empress's identity wasn't made clear, from what Rinpoche had said when he was holding the weapon and the information gathered from other sources, it was inferred that the Empress held a high position in the paradise. It was just that they weren't sure of her exact identity. "And this is?" The old man looked at Lin Xiaola, who was trying hard to separate her upper and lower eyelids. This girl wasn't in her information. "Her surname is Lin. Just pretend that she doesn't exist. Please come in." The room was decorated in a Chinese style with walnut and vermilion furniture. Even though Rinpoche couldn't tell if it was made of solid wood, such a high-ranking big shot couldn't possibly use laminated wood, right? "This is my wife. These are Mr. Run, Miss Qi, and Miss Lin, whom I have mentioned to you before." The old man introduced a woman in the room to them. "I have seen Madam on television many times. I didn't expect to have such an opportunity this time." Rinpoche laughed. After they sat down, the old woman poured tea for them, and the old man said, "I have known about you for a few years. Back then, you were running around everywhere, and I only came back after contacting you. I have wanted to meet you for a long time, but I never had the chance. Either I wasn't free, or I couldn't find you. Now, my wish has been fulfilled. There will be plenty of opportunities. With your current physique and cultivation of life nourishment, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future." Rinpoche laughed. While they were chatting, Lin Xiaola finally couldn't open her eyes. She slumped to the side and fell asleep. Rinpoche noticed it but pretended not to see it. In any case, the old man had a big belly and wouldn't stoop to her level. He couldn't figure out Lin Chala's identity and pretended not to see it. At this age, who can say for sure what will happen in the future? Moreover, I have come down now and don't have any duties. I won't have to worry so much in the future. The old man laughed. You'll come down? Rinpoche was stunned. The old man was also stunned by his reaction. He then shook his head and laughed. Although it wasn't a big deal for him to come down, the other party's reaction was that he didn't know anything. I came down last year. I've finally settled some of the matters that I need to attend to, so I can finally relax now, the old man explained. Only then did Rinpoche react. Last year, 2023, the other party should have come down. In other words, the person in charge had changed. Just as the Empress had said, a new ruler would have a new court. The leaders on Earth would change every 8 to 10 years. After a few decades, there would be a few changes, and it was hard to say how they would view him at that time. It had only been a few years, and the new generation actually didn't contact him. It wasn't that he was awesome. After all, his identity was special, and he had the so-called paradise behind him. He was a little surprised that the new generation didn't contact him. However, you don't have to worry. After all, with your identities, no matter who is in charge, it won't affect you. The current generation actually want to contact you for a long time, but I haven't finished handing over some matters. This time, besides fulfilling a wish, I invited you here to introduce you, the old man continued, seeming to read Rinpoche's mind. Don't tell me that you don't want to chat with an old man like me now that I'm no longer in charge. The old man chuckled. How is that possible? Rinpoche laughed. Many people can't even dream of chatting with the big boss. That's good. Don't call me big boss. Call me Mr., the old man said. Mr. Rinpoche nodded. I've been curious about the paradise for a long time. I wonder if you can tell me a little about it? Previously, when I heard the two of you talking, I always felt that the paradise and this world are of the same origin. Just like how Miss Chi addressed herself as Jean, which has been used since ancient times in our country. During the Qin dynasty, the first emperor, under Li Si's suggestion, used this word as a unique title for the emperor. I wonder if the word Jean in the paradise is a form of address or a unique title. My wife is a professor of literature. After so many years, I'm also very interested in these things. Rinpoche's eyes flickered. Was the old man really just curious? Or could he judge something from this word? He didn't dare to miss a word when talking to someone like the old man. Furthermore, they were talking about the paradise. It's a form of address, not a unique title, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. Chapter 732. Apart from Shi Qing, Rinpoche, the Empress, and all the other officials in the imperial court wouldn't be able to handle such a person. Whether it was in terms of his keen political sense, emotional intelligence, or cultural foundation. Even though Rinpoche was very careful, the other party still managed to get a lot of useful information from his casual conversation. Even if the other party didn't deliberately use this method to get information, he could still see some clues from Rinpoche's answers. This was probably kind of instinct. After chatting for 3 hours and having a very ordinary dinner, Rinpoche arranged to meet the other party the next day before leaving with Lin Xiaola and the Empress. I'm hungry. Let's eat, the Empress said as soon as they left the house. She couldn't even bring herself to eat the food for dinner. It was gone in one mouthful. After waking Lin Xiaola up, the three of them found a place to eat the entire hot pot restaurant. Yang Sen's eyes almost popped out. The place arranged for them was a good hotel. Rinpoche didn't know why they only booked 2 suites. Rinpoche pondered for a while. Would he share a suite with Lin Xiaola or the Empress? What are you thinking about? The Empress glanced at him while they were in the elevator. I'm thinking about whether to let Lin Xiaola share a suite with you, Rinpoche said bluntly. No. The Empress rejected him without hesitation. Then she can only share a suite with me. Rinpoche looked at Lin Xiaola with disdain. If it was Xin, his figure was much better than Lin Xiaola's. Furthermore, She was a bespectacled lady. No matter how he looked at it, she was better than Lin Xiaola, who only ate and slept. The Empress looked at him and said, "You and I share a suite. That's good." Ren Baqian immediately laughed. He had always supported this kind of suggestion. However, since it was a suite, it was divided into inner and outer rooms. Ren Baqian naturally sat on the sofa. Voluntarily. Really. As they sat on the sofa, Ren Baqian suddenly asked, "What does your Majesty wear when you sleep?" The Empress blushed and rolled her eyes at him. "Do you want to see?" With the wedding date set, the Empress seemed to be getting used to certain topics and not being so sensitive. "I want to see." Ren Baqian nodded his head and was kicked to the wall by the Empress. "It's a lie that I don't want to see it. If I don't want to see it, will Her Majesty blame me?" Ren Baqian asked while covering his nose. The Empress seriously thought about this question and said, "I will beat you to death." "Why did you kick me then?" Ren Baqian felt wronged. "Kick." The Empress's answer was simple and to the point. Ren Baqian, in any case, he would be beaten if he didn't want to see it, but he would be beaten if he wanted to see it, right? "When can you be more reasonable, Your Majesty?" Ren Baqian lamented. "Do you think I'm being unreasonable now?" The Empress looked at him and sneered. From her words, Ren Baqian could tell that she used to call Xiao Tian Tian, but now she was calling her Madame Niu. Ren Baqian felt that he wouldn't end up well if he continued to discuss the issue of reason with the Empress. It was a mistake to discuss this issue, and it had to be corrected. "I was wrong." The words from His Majesty's mouth were the truth. "If anyone dares to say no, just kill and bury them." Ren Baqian made a solemn vow. "What are your thoughts after seeing that person today, Your Majesty?" Ren Baqian changed the topic. "Too weak," the Empress said without hesitation. As for other things, her focus was completely different from Ren Baqian's. Naturally, the conclusions that they reached were very different. After watching TV until midnight, the Empress swayed her body and entered the room. Ren Baqian leaned on the sofa and watched the door close. Looking at the time, there was still more than 8 months before the wedding. This period of time was really long. The next day, after breakfast, a car took the three of them to the most mysterious place in the entire imperial capital. Ren Baqian was very curious and even a little nervous along the way. However, when he arrived, he realized that it was somewhat different from what he had imagined. The sentries everywhere were similar to what he had imagined. In addition, the scenery was pretty good. As for the rest, many famous places were just ordinary-looking bungalows. If it was in other places, it would at most have some historical value and could be visited. Other than that, there weren't many things that people would pay attention to. What was really worth paying attention to was the person who lived here. In a parlor, Ren Baqian finally met the successor of that old man. Yesterday, he went back and checked on his phone, so he more or less knew a little about him. He was about 10 years younger than the old man, but his hair had already turned white. When the two of them stood together, it was hard to tell who was older and who was younger. This place has received presidents and dignitaries from various countries, but this is the first time that the two of you have such statuses. Even I will be recorded in the annals of history. The other party laughed. Ren Baqian really didn't consider whether he would be recorded in the annals of Earth's history. However, even if he was recorded, he was afraid that it would be an unknown part of history, just like those people and things that were buried in history. It was a little different from the serious conversation that he had expected. After the four of them met, they simply sat in the room and chatted as if they were just trying to get to know each other. Not to mention that the other party was very busy. He had a lot of things to do every day. Ren Baqian didn't believe that the other party would spend half a day sitting here just to get to know each other. After a simple lunch, they finally got down to business. This time, we were negligent in our work and caused some trouble for Mr. Ren. Although it's harmless, it affected our mood. With this experience, we will be strict in this area in the future. I don't need you. I will send 1,000 people from the paradise to be stationed here, the Empress said directly. The Empress's words were very direct. She didn't want to beat around the bush with the other party because that wasn't her forte. Without any probing or giving the other party any time to react, she said what she wanted to say. 1,000 people wouldn't be a big deal if they were ordinary people. However, if there were 1,000 experts, then it would not be a small matter. The two of them carefully looked at the Empress and then at Rinpoche, but they didn't directly object. Instead, they thought for a while and said, 1,000 people isn't a small number. I'm afraid it will be a little troublesome to make arrangements. After all, they aren't ordinary people, and it will be easy to cause a disturbance with them. I'm not asking, the Empress said directly. The other party smiled. If it wasn't an inquiry, then it was a notification. Although the other party was surprised by this matter, he wasn't surprised by the Empress's attitude. After all, with her strength, it would be strange if she spoke to them like a politician. However, 1,000 people would probably cause a lot of trouble in the country. 2 hours later, Rinpoche and the Empress finally left the reception hall. The other party agreed to the Empress's request for 1,000 experts. In fact, it was difficult for the other party to object. However, for the rest of the time, the few of them discussed another matter. They were building a new city in the country. Wuji City, or rather Wuji City. As the name suggested, the function and significance of this city could be seen from its name. As the peak of martial arts, it was also the highest point. For the time being, it wasn't only the temporary settlement for 1,000 people, but also the martial arts training base in the country. This was a city that wasn't open to the public. After the spread of martial arts, this place became the gathering place for experts from all over the world. From a certain point of view, Rinpoche and the Empress's 1,000 people had become the signboard of this place. With these 1,000 people here, this place would become the target of all the experts in the country and even the world. In a future where the entire world was changing, the value of this city could be said to be immeasurable. At the same time, the other party could also use this city to gather the most uncontrollable group of people. Rinpoche suspected that the other party had been thinking about this problem for a long time. In any case, he could be said to be working with the country to plan for the future. The gains were huge. Of course, Rinpoche also made a series of other agreements with the other party. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.